Ladies and gentlemen, my name is VUK JOVANOVICH. I'm an investigative reporter. I was by coincidence in Las Vegas, Nevada when I met Upton, a journalist, and met also FBI Director Ted Gunnison. And through them I met all of American Patriots. Also, of course, Cathy O'Brien and Phillips. I did this documentary film which was huge, 4 hours, 4 hour time. At the time, it was about 95, 96, it was the most popular film because I didn't do any cuts. I showed that film in Justice Department at Rosenbaum, and I insisted that little Kelly Cox, the daughter of Cathy O'Brien, that you'll be able to see, should be sent to London for deprogramming process. That's why I have some happy ends, and I hope that this program is enormous. It's the most dangerous game that Satanists are doing with us. They're programming people, they're programming your mind, they're poisoning water, they're poisoning the whole world, and you Americans are the worst victim of everything, and that's I know because I was with Alex Jones, with all American Patriots. I'll play also the film about Upton, who was the one who introduced me, and my friend Ted Gunnison from Las Vegas, Nevada. You'll be able to see them, how they look like, and I wish you good time, and you will see why Roberto De Niro was forbidden by CIA to play the film Presidential Model, and that will give you some idea why it's so dangerous. You will see how they operate, because Cathy O'Brien was at the time when Reagan was president, and he was only the puppet. The main figure was a pedophile, a big pedophile, Bush Senior, who is the worst criminal of all, person whose father was dealing with Hitler, and they are the worst enemy of the United States in the world. And we hope that person who I happen to know, Mr. Trump, will win. And I hope if you'll be able to send him this tape, which I'm not able because I'm limited in Serbia. Please do me a favor and send to his people in New York, wherever they are, send this tape and tell my regards to VUK JOVANOVICH, and also tell them that American Ambassador Mr. Scott knows where I am and where he can find me. You'll do me a great favor and send this tape to Alex Jones, and Alex Jones will be very happy to have this tape after so long time, and also tell Mr. Trump, and I tried to send him a message as well, that he should meet Cathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips and get more information because of the scandals and everything else that's going on in America, and that all America should know about that. So please do my best and do me a favor and send this tape to Mr. Trump. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy my film, and sorry that quality is not that good, but most important is the story about that.
Dedicated on the way of trying to stop phenomenal fascism, and I spent some of my investigation report by now by working on various topics. One of them was Kurt Waldheim topics, which took 7 years of my life, and very deep research in reality of World War II and cover-up of one of the biggest Nazi war criminals who also made a big career. Mind control programming also made my interest, and I'm very delightful today, ladies and gentlemen, to present you the people, the victim of the program, Cathy O'Brien, who I'm enjoying today her hospitality in her sweet home in Tennessee, and Mark Phillips as the person who saved Cathy's life. And my very first question is to Cathy O'Brien to tell us a few words about when she gets involved in that Untitled project, and how old you were there when you started with that.
I was born into a multi-generational incest-based family, and my father was sexually abusing me from as far back as I can remember, and he often bragged that he was substituting his penis for my mother's nipple while I was still an infant. And my father had created a dissociative identity disorder by his sexual abuse. Dissociative identity disorder used to be called multiple personality disorder, and it's defined as the mind-sane defense to trauma that's too horrible to comprehend. Even though I couldn't know that what my father was doing to me was wrong, nevertheless, the pain and suffocation that I suffered from his sexual abuse was horrific enough to create the multiple personality disorder. And it was the multiple personality disorder, dissociative identity disorder, as it's more aptly called now, is why I was a chosen one, or a prime candidate for the government's CIA MK Ultra mind control project. My compartmentalization of memory was something that they were very much interested in. And by the time I was 6 years old, my father had been using me in child pornography and was caught sending this child pornography through the U.S. mails. When this happened, he was approached by the head of the local Michigan Mafia, who was also heavily involved in Michigan politics and U.S. politics, Gerald Ford, the same Gerald Ford that went on to become president of the United States. Gerald Ford came to my father and offered him immunity from prosecution if he would sell me into the project. My father thought it was a wonderful idea. He felt like the government sanctioned his child abuse, and he went ahead and sold me into the CIA's mind control project.
Tell me something. I was talking with various people about Gerald Ford, and then I was discussing with various people on that topic. What is your, if you will say, proves that Gerald Ford could be involved in child pornography and being a member of organized crime? Is there any significant proof that you know of or you can recall of? Because you was following his career, you met him in even your 20s, and when you was 30 even, Gerald Ford. How do you know about his career of being so?
Gerald Ford, if I might introduce this in, Gerald Ford has got a reputation among members of law enforcement, Park Service, even we understand persons who have contributed information from Secret Service and the Treasury Department have all made comments to certain members of Congress with regards to Gerald Ford's activities and his proclivity to some really strange and bizarre sexual habits. It's been well known throughout the elite inner social circles in Washington, D.C. and about that Gerald Ford has been involved with organized crime since his very beginnings in politics. His wife, Betty Ford, became a chronic drug and alcohol abuser. And as a matter of fact, he capitalized on that by opening up what is known as the Betty Ford Center in Palm Springs, which supposedly and does treat alcohol and drug addictions in the stars and the elite social persons, both in the United States and abroad. But Gerald Ford's reputation, although not established certainly by Cathy with photographs of him with children or adults or anyone else, his reputation is extraordinarily well documented and well known by a lot of politicians and certainly law enforcement that has come forward with supporting documentation.
When you're talking about supporting documentation, are we able to get some information on that or to get some copies of that?
We have verbal support from certain members of the federal law enforcement agencies, and I'm saying not that, but like the FBI, who have agreed in part to testify before Congress if we are able to get a legitimate investigation into Cathy O'Brien's claims. Now, there is an FBI officer by the name, formerly an FBI officer who was head of the office in Los Angeles, California, the FBI's office there. His name is Ted Gunderson. Ted Gunderson has discussed Gerald Ford's reputation and some medical reports that Ted Gunderson is familiar with from clients who have reported being abused by Gerald Ford. So Ted Gunderson is outspoken, he is retired, and he is one of the very few that is able to talk about this at this time.
So obviously I will be able to get in. I know Ted Garrison very well, and
Sure.
I met him a few occasions, and I will be able to get some more information on that topic.
Yeah,
But
hard proofs are very hard to come by when it concerns a former or president of the United States. It's very difficult to come by hard proofs because as quickly as you display them, they're taken away from you for reasons of national security. So hence the reason that we are unable to provide for your viewing audience hard evidences, because we are using those hard evidences that we have acquired in hopes that we can present them to Congress and have something done very formally on this.
come back to Cathy, to you. You was mentioned that Gerald Ford went to your home and he introduced himself. Was he there in the capacity of how you said member of organized crime, dealing with pornography, and how he get in that time in contact with such sophisticated CIA operations like mind control?
Well, my
Or it was
father,
his private business before to be an organized crime?
it had been his business for some time, which is how my father was doing the child pornography during my earliest years. But my mother was also multi-generational incest-based. She suffered from dissociative identity disorder, from child sexual abuse. And her brother, my Uncle Bob Tanis, also of the Muskegon, Michigan area, was very much a part of this abuse, and he was definitely a connection between my father and Gerald Ford. My Uncle Bob Tanis was U.S. Air Force intelligence and also claimed to be working for the intelligence arm of the Catholic Vatican, which is the Jesuits.
So in other words, we'll be getting some information from that aspect of the. Mark, why the child abused people? I mean, children like Cathy, were the objects for such mind control, and how you, as an expert, could describe that?
Luke, we need to go back in history just a little bit. In the 30s, Adolf Hitler was researching two methods for obtaining control of the world. First of all, through nuclear devices, which would, in essence, destroy the victory of his spoils of victory, and also through mind control. And what Adolf Hitler had discovered was that the children of Northern European witchcraft-based families that were involved in Satanism and other forms of blood trauma, ritualistic type abuse, very commonly found in Catholicism and some other types of Christian belief systems. He found that there was an interesting phenomena that was occurring with the children. The children that had been abused literally since birth had developed some extraordinary senses visually. They had 44 times visual acuity improvement. In other words, they could see practically in the back of their head. He could envision using that one thing alone for his special SS forces. In addition to that, he also found out that these children had developed photographic memories, and along with a host of other psychological as well as psychiatric changes that seem to occur when people are exposed to horrific abuse. He took those studies, or actually had a fellow by the name of Heinrich Himmler began to delve deeper and deeper into the research until he formulated a plan to literally genetically encode these children through interbreeding among these incest-based families. I guess plainly spoken, VUK, these people were abused, therefore they abused their own children, and their children abused their children, and you develop generation after generation of these abused children, which of course grow into adults. What we what we have found is that our government, the United States, became interested in it about the same period of time. Our intelligence officers that were serving in Germany at that time began feeding us information back that Hitler was going to breed a super race. And inside this super race was going to be a nucleus of individuals that Hitler or somebody else could have absolute control over. Now, these people would have high IQs, much higher than the average person, and it was not so much that they were smarter, it's the fact that they had been abused since birth. Cathy O'Brien's IQ is above average. Most of the people that we're dealing with here, their IQs are much higher than average. And this is as a result of not the interbreeding or the multi-generational effect. It has something to do with the abuse that she incurred. Her brain literally was forced to use more and more of itself until she has developed some incredible, but not so incredible characteristics, such as photographic memory.
This, from my perspective, it was like a compartmentalization of memory where the abuse was compartmentalized in a certain part of my brain so that the rest of my mind could function normally as though nothing had happened. And I believe that's why it's termed the mind sane defense to trauma too horrible to comprehend. But this compartmentalization has amnesic barriers around this photographic memory. And it was this compartmentalization of memory that the government was very much interested in and utilized throughout the Reagan-Bush administration in particular for me to be programmed to carry out specific criminal covert operations, which they wanted kept secret, as well as to deliver messages verbatim to different government leaders that were involved in implementing the New World Order through mind control of the masses.
I have a question. I present your case to the various editors of big magazine in Europe and also editors of the various publishing houses. They found a big interest, but at the same time I faced quite a skepticism because of the fact that something what is very well known to you, and you're talking very spontaneously, was a very difficult topic for them to comprehend, and that's why I'm here today to give them more details and more accurate information and details regarding those topics. When you're mentioning that it was used first for sexual purposes, can you tell us the beginning of your sexual abuse and what is your recollection on that? Who was the first abusers that you faced in your childhood, and gradually how it's turned on to your other kind of utility they found for you, which is also sending messages and dealing with drugs?
Well, my primitive behavior had been confused when my father was substituting his penis for my mother's nipple, because my sexual experience went into a realm of innate survival instincts such as eating food would do. And my father was my first sexual abuser. And from there, he prostituted me to various local policemen, local Masons, local politicians, such as U.S. Congressman Guy Vanderjagt, who later went on to head the Republican National Committee that put George Bush into the office of president. But my Uncle Bob Tanis was also one of my primary abusers from a very early age.
My next question is the involvement of implementation and how the Nazi came to this country. You was lecturing over 30 times in various communities, including police, right?
Yes. We've spent the last 5 years, Kathy and I have been lecturing with primarily psychiatrists, psychologists, mental health caregivers, and of course state, federal, and as well as local police groups all over the country. We're entitled to teach in 11 states for continuing education credits for these particular persons. And to answer your question about where all these scientists came from, the United States government had in 1947 started a Project Paperclip. Project Paperclip was the importation of Nazi and fascist scientists that had scattered after World War II out of Germany and Italy all over the world. And we were bringing them together and bringing them over here. We had propulsion scientists and we had mind scientists or psychiatrists.
You have in your library, I saw the other day, the book written down about that, right?
Yeah, a lady in Washington, D.C., who's a very prominently well-known reporter for the Washington Post, I believe. Her name is Linda Hunt. She's been a Washington correspondent for many years. She did the actual research into the Freedom of Information archives and actually came up with the information on Project Paperclip. And people like Werner von Braun, the more notable ones that most people know about, propulsion scientists that helped actually build NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, from the ground up. He, along with a lot of other scientists, were brought to this country over a 43-year period of time. And they were secretly placed in our learning institutions, our colleges, universities, excuse me, and into major corporations, research labs, as well as NASA and the Defense Department.
If you mention over 43 years, means far behind the World War II.
Yes, yes.
Does it explain some kind of putting these two nations together in a way, Germany and the United States?
I don't think they ever separated. As a matter of fact, I'm not saying this flippantly, but I don't believe that Nazi Germany lost the war. I believe they just had to move their operations from their country to this country.
You mentioned the other day, and it was about to go to this place in the state of Alabama, place where the NASA center is, and the place where you mentioned is a home for a lot of Nazi scientists. What's the name of the place? And
Huntsville, Alabama is the home of the NASA rocket propulsion group of scientists. And NASA is about 100 miles from Nashville, Tennessee, where we are now. And NASA has become the home of an enormous number of German scientists, many of whom have had new identities supplied to them. They've had complete changes done in their histories so that they cannot be found as to who they actually were. Well, most of those scientists that were involved in mind control and rocket propulsion during the 40s and 30s under Hitler's regime are now either dead or they're retired. They're old, very, very old. But their children who took their places are in fact working at the facility in Huntsville, Alabama, known as NASA.
But also a lot of war criminals from Germany that didn't have any involved in any research got their home here.
Yes, the ones that are still living are still, many of them residing in the Huntsville area.
Oh, it's a very interesting phenomenon. I was involved myself in a long process of getting Kurt Waldheim file to trial, and I met people even in Justice Department, one very, I call them Don Quixote's organization among Justice Department,
yes,
who was tracing this war criminal with a lot of problems. And one book just came out recently, 2 years ago, called Betrayal, by Alder Rosenbaum, who was head at the time of the Justice Department Criminal Division's Special Investigation on War Criminals, and he was describing what kind of trouble this organization had by tracing these criminals even in the United States, which looks very, very unusual, but not unusual after I hear your story.
Well, that's true. Of course, when Linda Hunt did her book, she too ran into a number of obstacles with the Justice Department. She ran into, like you have, cooperative members, as well as people who tried to deter her from her research. Now, most of this research has, of course, been declassified, or most of the information that the research was based upon has been declassified and is available if someone is willing to dig it out. Well, she did.
Well, that's a very interesting phenomenon. Now I'm living in the States. For me, living in for some period of time in communist pressure, I was very happy to come to the country which I thought is epitome of democracy and freedom and everything that we're hearing on a daily basis by most American politicians. Now we are facing one phenomena of having people who call themselves patriots, who call themselves people very scared for the future of something that they call World World Order, which was just as verbatim said by George Bush, which reminds a lot of people in Europe of the New World Order, which was done by Adolf Hitler. How you put these two things together?
Well, what we're concerned about is that mind control is being used today, as it was in Nazi Germany, as a tool of New World Order. You know, Adolf Hitler was really the second person in history to mention the fact that he thought that the only way that this globe or humanity would survive itself would be through a one world order, a singular government headed by a singular person. Well, Adolf Hitler wanted to ensure that that singular person be in absolute control. So he thought that by having human beings, that he could totally manipulate their minds externally. In other words, his puppets, or the people like Cathy O'Brien, people who had been conditioned from birth and trained from birth to accept orders and to act on those orders without any social conscience. These are the ones that Adolf Hitler envisioned would be his puppets of control for the world. Well, the first person, I might add, was Nero in Rome, and Adolf Hitler was second. George Bush was the third person in history to stand before society and say the words New World Order. But mind control, VUK, is only a tool. It's just simply a tool and an indicator, a social indicator, of what all of us can expect in the not too distant future, unless this information is released to the public where it belongs.
Cathy, you mentioned in your part of the book, which was very interesting for various people that I was introducing your book to, your knowledge, because you was a person inside. And I will ask you something that people don't have in your book, because you're not a professional writer, and this is maybe your first book that you're writing, and I hope not the last one. Can you give us some more accurate details about your knowledge of people that claim to be World War Order? You met a lot of people. You was in the White House. You was in various military bases. Can you tell us some more information how you can determine those people that claim themselves to be a member of that order?
There was an organization that was referred to as the Order of the Rose, and this was an elite group that was at the very top of what I was aware of for the implementation of the New World Order through mind control of the masses.
Should you not mention the United Nations just recently adopted the rose as their official flower?
This Order of the Rose, by everything I know, was attached to the United Nations. George Bush, of course, began with the United Nations. He continued his work in the United Nations through his good friend and associate, Madeleine Albright. Madeleine Albright is now our UN ambassador, or not our UN, but the United States' UN ambassador. And this Order of the Rose was not so much another organization like we hear about, like the Illuminati or the Masons or something like that, but instead was used as an indicator to each other amongst those at the top that they were involved in implementing the New World Order through mind control of the masses. George Bush was involved in the Order of the Rose, and Bill Clinton was involved in the Order of the Rose.
What is your personal contact and contents to that topic? You met with people personally. You saw them wearing various symbols which remind people of that rose colors and everything else.
Yes, they would wear a rose as an indicator to each other that they were a part of the Order of the Rose. And
when it's happened and how you describe that? When you saw that particular phenomenon?
For example, at the White House, I was at a White House cocktail party during the Reagan administration. And
do you remember the year and the members, anything, like month and something like that?
It was, I believe, 1985 to 86. And at that time, the Prime Minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney, was brought to the White House. He was being honored at this particular cocktail party. He wore the rosebud on his lapel to indicate that he was a part of this Order of the Rose.
You saw him, you personally, at that party? There was
Yes,
some
I
kind of a
did.
closed party, closed society, without presence of the journalists, I believe, right?
I'm not aware of any journalists that were there. There were quite a few people that were at this particular cocktail party. Not all of them wore roses. The ones that did certainly indicated to me, since I knew, that they were part of this Order of the Rose.
Who was there on this party? Who was
George
in the party?
Bush, Madeleine Albright, and Ronald Reagan, Senator Byrd, to name a few.
One interesting thing, there was a presidential helicopter that crashed in the state of Maryland in 1993, I believe in June of 1993. That was a helicopter that Bush used with some frequency. And one of the odd things about it was, instead of having the presidential crest embroidered into the seats, it had a rose. Now, Cathy O'Brien had reported a rose that was embroidered into the leather seats of a helicopter in 1990 to the FBI when she gave her testimony. But it wasn't until 1993 that we actually got corroboration of that through a news report when a presidential helicopter actually crashed with, of course, no one in it of any importance as far as politically goes. But nevertheless, the helicopter did crash, and photographs of the seats were taken.
So there, photographs available?
Yes,
in that respect.
yes.
Yes, sir, and the rose indicator was, that I saw in George Bush's helicopter was black. This black rose was an indication of death. The red rose was an indication that I would be used in sexual mode for prostitution purposes. The white rose was an indicator that messages were being delivered. When baby's breath was surrounding the rose or the rosebud, it was an indicator that my daughter Kelly was usually involved in that particular operation, which meant that she was going to be sexually abused as well.
These were her cues. These were visual cues that the person delivering them would be privy to, VUK, but no one else.
And these, in the course of using these particular cues, they would simply touch the rose to access a particular program message or to program one in. That wasn't all that it took to set the program. There was so much that was done at the onset, so much trauma that I witnessed that had caused my mind to be primed for accepting program, and this base program was already laid. From the base program, other programming, specific programming, the delivering of messages was then added, or the particular sexual perversion that had to be fulfilled was added, and then they were ready to be accessed, and when it was time to be accessed, they would simply touch the
You just
rose.
mentioned that you was testifying in front of FBI.
Yes.
What kind of testifying was that we're talking about?
In 1989, I brought forward the diaries of her controller or handler, Alex Houston, because these diaries contained a number of large cash transactions among high-ranking officials, both within the Justice Department, in the entertainment business, as well as some politicians, including Bennett.
Cathy, you have in front of you a list of the people that you collected after your recollection of everything that happened after you was rescued by Mark Phillips. People that you can say and swear the member of the Rose. Can you give me this list and tell me what people are on that list? And you also having a list of all drug traffickers that you was acquainted with. You met them and you work with them.
Yes, this is a partial list that I've compiled. It was just a matter of listing some names for convenience purposes for people investigating. And I refer to it as a perfect traitors list because these are certainly traitors of our country that are involved in implementing the New World Order under this group that they refer to as the Order of the Rose. And the orders from the Rose were orders from George Bush. That's not to say he was the very top person in this effort, but he certainly was in this, the aspect of it that was going on in our country, Canada, Mexico, and throughout the Caribbean. One of his primary people that was working under him in the UN capacity was Madeleine Albright, and Madeleine Albright was part of the Order of the Rose that was involved in the Caribbean operations, and even had an office in the Organization of American States office in Washington, D.C.
You visited her. Can you tell me more details how you came in touch with her? And you told me that she also sexually harassed you in that office at the time. Can you tell me approximately the time frame and when it's happened and when you visited, and who brought you to this meeting with her, and what was the purpose of that meeting?
This was in, I believe it was 1985. I have a little more difficulty with exact dates and times because as a programmed multiple, in essence, it was as though it were one long day to me. I was not aware of time, my age, or anything else, but Madeleine Albright was at the White House cocktail party that was being thrown for Brian Mulroney, Prime Minister of Canada, who is also Order of the Rose. And
main purpose for you being there was what?
Was for prostitution to Brian Mulroney at that time. But anytime I was in Washington, D.C., it was usually multi-purposed, as was this particular trip. And after having been prostituted to Brian Mulroney that
Can you explain me the situation in more details? Who brought you there, and what was the room that was used for that reason? Also in White House, or he was guest in White House? He slept in White House?
Yes, he had a room in the White House at that time, and I was brought into a White House cocktail party for the purposes of making contact with Brian Mulroney for prostitution later that evening in his room in the White House.
His room? Can you describe this room?
It was one of the nicer guest quarters that they have in the White House, and it was actually a suite. It wasn't just a bedroom. There was an outside room to it that had a sofa in it and some comfortable furniture. But also in that room, by the time I entered, were 3 other girls, one of which was a very dear friend of mine who remains a dear friend of mine to date. She's a mind-controlled slave of U.S. Senator Arlen Specter. She's not free at this time. She is amnesic of most of the events, and she's anxiously awaiting the day that someone will be able to rescue her from her ongoing mind control existence.
What is her name, and where is she located now?
For her safety, I will not say her name or her location, but I will say that she has flashes of memory at times. And when I was talking with her recently, she said that...
You met with her in person?
Yes, I've seen her since. She knows that the book Transformation of America has been written, and she finds tremendous hope for her and her children and for other mind control victims, that someone is actually vocalizing the atrocities that are going on in this country.
To come back to the topic of Mulroney, so you was brought to the entrance of the White House, especially which entrance he was using for?
Service entrance. And to exemplify how the mind control slave's subconscious is so literal, my escort, Secret Service escort, stopped outside the door and pointed out the sign that said service entrance on it to me and enunciated it quite differently so that I understood it to read, serve us in trance. And the service entrance was very often how I was brought into the White House. He took me inside and up to the room that was being used for a cocktail party. Well, actually, it's a series of rooms that's all interconnected where you walk from one right on into
It was
the
during
other.
the Reagan administration, right?
Yes.
President
Reagan
was
was president at the time, and
Mrs. Reagan was not there, or she was there?
not that I saw. She wasn't. I never had any association with her, and didn't see her around at all.
So
But
who brought you there? I mean, just Secret Service, but who was your mind control operator at the time?
at the time, my handler was Alex Houston. Alex Houston was the one who was part of the country music industry, which was the cover for our travels that brought me wherever I was ordered to go. U.S. Senator Robert C. Byrd was my owner, and as my owner, Senator Byrd directed my activities. He's the one who told Alex Houston to have me in specific places at designated times. And on this occasion, it was Senator Byrd who ordered that Alex Houston bring me to the White House. And also, because I had other business in Washington that I would have to be tending and mind control programmed for at that particular time. So Alex Houston had brought me to Washington and left me off with the Secret Service, who escorted me into the White House and to the rooms, the series of rooms where this particular cocktail party for Brian Mulrooney was.
So there was
being held.
you spent all night in bed with him and having intercourse with him, or?
Not all night, just until he was sexually gratified, and then I left from there and was with Senator Byrd, as was so often the case.
What do you mean by you was with him after you slept with him as well?
Yes, very often there were a series of men that I would have to sleep with have sex with in one particular night. But as a sex slave, there was no personal interaction, there was no conversation, there was no keeping me around for any purposes. I was simply there for sexual gratification purposes. And that was the case on this night. As I was going through this cocktail party, George Bush and Madeleine Albright were also present. And George Bush signaled me to come over to he and Madeleine Albright and talk. And it was there that Madeleine Albright ordered that I would be brought to her OAS office the next day.
So she said that you mentioned in your book, I remember the page 167 even by heart, that George Bush told you about Margaret Albright. Who is she and something like that.
Well, yes, he made some jokes to the effect that she was the, quote, Reverend Mother of all sisters, which cryptically meant that she ordered mind control slaves such as myself around. And that particular cryptic language was indigenous to the Catholic Vatican, the Jesuit mind control aspect of my victimization. So the Order of the Rose and the Catholic influence that I was experiencing at that particular time put me into the Catholic Jesuit mode of operation that I had been previously programmed for and conditioned for, and was often used for carrying out particular Caribbean operations.
And now your second meeting with her was in that building that you was mentioning before. Can you
Yes.
describe the building and her office and how it looks like and how this event had happened?
Well, the OAS building is located in Washington, D.C., and Alex Houston dropped me off out front. I went through the front door, and there's like a hallway that goes all the way through the OAS building and right out to the back where there's a rock garden. Her office...
How the garden looks like? There's some elements you can describe?
The rock garden had a little walkway, like a sidewalk, where people who worked there, people who were brought in, could go outside. There were different rocks, some trees and shrubs there, and a lot of Caribbean art was around the woodwork. I noticed that there was some Haitian artwork in particular that I recognized from having been in Haiti on operations so many times.
So you was first probably you went through the guard there, and who told you where you're going, right? And first somebody asked you where you're going, or?
No, I just went straight in. I already knew where I was supposed to go, and I'm sure that the different indicators that I was wearing was a tip to many that I was part of the CIA operations anyway. I, too, had to wear the different roses, and particularly in my hair. But I had been given a little red rosy cross when I was first brought into the Order of the Rose.
Could you just keep this, what you was talking yesterday, and I just want to be curious if you can tell us on the camera that. You went to her room and she was sitting there, right? And she was...
yes, after we talked
there?
outside and I had received my orders, she brought me back into her office, which is located near the rock garden, and it's on the left as you go in. The office was really quite small, but it too had some of the Caribbean art on the walls. Some Haitian carvings were around the room. There was a file cabinet. Overall, it was a relatively small office because it was not her main office. But this OAS office was directly connected to the United Nations, and anytime I was around Madeleine Albright, the Catholic Jesuit aspect was accessed and used, and she accessed my sex programming at that time and made me perform oral sex on her before leaving.
So how long was this actually? So what she did was she just take her clothes off and order you to order oral sex on her?
Well, actually, she just removed her panties. She was wearing a dress at the time, a longer skirt, which was more suitable for summer. It was a summer type weather anyway, and she just removed her nylon panties and had me perform oral sex on her while she sat in her office chair. And
was she excited with that? Did she have orgasm?
Yeah.
You can think
Yeah.
of. How long you stayed there in her office?
As long as it took. I really don't know how long it was. Any time for something so disgusting is too long. But it was just until she was sexually gratified, and then I was just ordered to leave.
So what kind of order did she give you in that particular moment when she met with you?
Well, she just accessed the sex program part, the same part like Hillary Clinton would use, and that was done through the sister references, particularly a twin sister reference where the sex programming had actually already been instilled, and the removal of her panties and with her spreading her legs and giving me orders was really all it took.
So in other words, you was completely automatic. So you was just because of your mind control and your robotic behavior in the time.
Totally robotic, and I had no ability to do anything other than what I was instructed or what I had been previously trained to do. And she was well aware of the fact that I was programmed and trained. She was aware of the fact that I was used in pornography with Larry Flint's Hustler magazine.
Okay, you have some magazine where you can see the photographs of you on that magazine.
Those are available.
They're available on the Larry Flint's and Enterprise and Hustler magazine. Okay, what I would like to ask you this question that we were starting this programming, this particular segment was about your knowledge of other members of the Order of the Rose. That you can. Did you give any testimony to any organization like FBI or anything regarding that Order of the Rose?
No organization like that. As a matter of fact, there are certain factions, criminal factions of the government that are involved in this. There's certain factions of CIA and certain factions of FBI, much lesser on the FBI. This was very high up in government. This is government officials such as Mexican President Miguel de la Madrid, who was president during the Reagan administration, Salinas, who was vice president and later went on to be president of Mexico.
You met the person personally?
Yes.
You did also perform your sexual...
With De La Madrid.
De La Madrid, not with Salinas.
Several times with De La Madrid, yes.
Where, in Mexico or in...
In Mexico.
In Mexico.
And other people involved were like Bill Clinton. In 1984, I had occasion to be at the CIA Near-Death Trauma Center compound in Lampe, Missouri. And Bill Clinton and George Bush were there together.
Mm-hmm.
To some people in this country, it seems odd that a Republican and a Democrat would be together. But in fact, their agendas were exactly the same. Their agendas didn't even have to do with the Democratic-Republican parties, did not have to do with the best interests of the United States. Their interests were this new world order. They both had exactly the same goal and the same agenda. At that time, they were conversing to that effect, and Bush said that when the American people became disillusioned with the Republican Party, that Bill Clinton, as a Democrat, would be brought into the presidency to finish carrying out this new world order plan.
Other subject is when you was discussing, I'm recalling now the tape that you sent me to Europe, what I was showing to people that editors and some people from the various magazines that find big interest, but at the same time very big skepticism, because they don't have particular details in their topics. You was talking about this hunting field when Bush and Clinton were present. Can you tell me more particular where was happened, which plant you're talking about, and what you detailed, how you can detail that?
Well, this was this most dangerous game, as they referred to it, was a matter of human hunting. And when a mind-control slave such as myself was stripped of clothes and turned loose in the woods, I was then hunted by George Bush, Dick Cheney, and Bill Clinton, among others. But they were the main ones. I do not believe that it was necessary for them to have subjected me to this form of trauma. There were so many other traumas going on at the time. My mind was already prime conditioned for mind control program. So I really don't understand it, except for the fact that they found great pleasure in this form of human hunting. And they took it from particular military maneuvers. And
which base we're talking about when you was recalling the situation when Clinton was present and Mr. Bush? Which airspace?
There's a little place called Lampe, Missouri, that's just across the Arkansas line. Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas at that time, and his whole cocaine operation that was Mena, Arkansas was the main hub for, was bringing cocaine into this CIA compound. And this particular Swiss villa, as they called it, amphitheater, in Lampe, Missouri, was actually a CIA compound out in the woods, military fencing all around it, and mind control training center where there was high-tech equipment was in one building. There were offices in another. There were little Swiss-style villas or cabins where different officials in either the military, CIA, or politics would stay, and it would house them while they were there for either the cocaine activities, for the paramilitary operations that were going on. You know, there were black helicopters everywhere, total robotic guys that were being used in special forces.
Which special forces you're referring to? There was also another program on mind control by Delta Force,
yes.
Right? Can you describe, what is your knowledge? Do you have any knowledge of that, or you met these people, and can you describe me some more of this?
The Delta Force and the Navy SEALs are an elite part of the military that is mind controlled, like the mercenaries. I'm more familiar with the mercenaries that were being trained to carry out international operations that weren't necessarily sanctioned by Congress, and they were brought into other countries, such as South America, and to carry out their orders. when in a country like that, the airplanes would then come back with the drugs in them. And the drugs were then sold on the streets here in America and really worldwide. The CIA's so-called war on drugs was nothing more than the CIA eliminating their competition and taking over the drug industry. So it was all inter-attached. It all interworked. At this particular compound in Lampe, Missouri, the paramilitary operations there were for more of the UN aspect. They didn't wear UN uniforms. They wore black uniforms, had black helicopters, and this was for implementing the New World Order and didn't really have anything to do with our actual military defense.
So there were some specific units which was probably out of control, maybe, but they was very well known to the President of the United States because he was taking part of that.
Oh, very well known, yes, and maybe not so well known even to some higher officials in the military because this was not a routine military. It was a routine military base. It was not routine military maneuvers. It was not known to the American public. Instead, this was secret operations and, like I said, for the purposes of bringing in the New World Order.
And also, I believe, acquiring a lot of money that was paid on the street of various cities,
yeah,
which was used for various operations.
Yes, it's enormous amounts of money that were brought in through the drug industry. If we had this illegally gained money actually being used for our country, we wouldn't have a national debt here. There wouldn't be any problem at all. But instead, all this money was being used for the global effort. So the money was being funneled into that. Much of it, I'm aware, was being funneled through the Catholic, like the Catholic convents, Jesuit schools, and all the money a lot of times was being funneled right through there, through the Catholic Church for laundering purposes, and then actually put into the New World Order effort. Another one of these compounds was on Mount Shasta in California.
You were there too?
Yes, I was.
How many times you were there?
One time I was taken there.
Which year we're talking about? Which year? Can you recall the year?
December 1986. And that was when George Bush and Dick Cheney were at that particular compound and indulged in their perverse pleasure of most dangerous game.
Did you sleep with George Bush yourself?
No, never. Even though he was present when he had turned me loose in the woods, he also had turned my daughter, Kelly, loose. She was only 6 years old at the time. And later on that evening, when Kelly was brought in...
In California? You're talking about California?
When Kelly was brought in, she said that she had been caught, same as me, to quote her, in that so-called most dangerous game. That was to make her feel responsible for the sexual abuse that followed, and it was to make me feel responsible for it, because had we not been caught, then we wouldn't have had to have endured the sexual abuse that followed. George Bush sexually assaulted my daughter, and Dick Cheney sexually assaulted me.
So now, can you recall who brought you to this Californian based, and can you give more details on that topic, where you was brought, how this compound looks like, and everything else, which will help us more to understand and comprehend the situation, which was probably very shocking when I was presenting it to the various media organizations in Europe.
Well, Alex Houston was making a trip across the country to California at that particular time. In California, in December of that year, during the Christmas break, is when Ronald Reagan came in, De La Madrid came in from Mexico, and it was all part of the groundwork for what's known as NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which this particular groundwork was actually the opening of the Juarez, Texas, Mexican border to the free flow, free trade of cocaine and heroin into this country. So,
but I believe also in the economy, other economy,
yes.
Not exactly the campaign.
Yes. So that was really the primary purpose for making this trip across country to California. And en route, we stopped in the Lake Shasta area.
Who was with you?
Alex Houston, Kelly, and I were traveling by motorhome across country. And we stopped at Merle Haggard's.
Did you have a cocaine on your
Yes.
home?
Yes.
And you saw Houston delivering cocaine to various people?
Oh yeah. More often, I was the one who actually had to make the cocaine deals or load it out because I was the slave. Why should he have to carry it? Is the way he thought. So I was usually the one that carried those large amounts of cocaine to the different warehouses, facilities, and all where the cocaine was dropped off.
Can you recall to whom you delivered the cocaine at the time, just for curiosity reasons?
Oh, many times the cocaine was brought to a CIA drug drop, as it was referred, in the state of Kentucky. It was Diamond Tavern's resort where the cocaine was brought in. Another place was at an abandoned amusement park in Ohio where the cocaine was dropped off. There was usually large quantities of cocaine involved in those kind of deals. Aside from that, it was just minor, hand distribution to different people in the country music industry or different politicians.
Did you have him paying you on the spot, this kind of money, or you never saw money, or how it was done?
On the larger deals, there was not money exchanged. A lot of times there were bank transactions that had occurred that I had been programmed to deliver the specifics on the larger deals. On the smaller deals, there was some money that was made at that time.
Now, Mike, we have now some. One of the reasons I came here was very much to dig out some more evidence on various aspects of the story, which was very, very shocking for most Europeans. I said, maybe Americans living here and being faced with the situation on a daily basis in one way or another, even that we can say that most Americans are not familiar with this back scenes happening on a daily basis in this country. You've been showing me the book. Can you tell me the contents of the book, Mark, and what is the book all about?
Well,
yes,
Becca, first of all, I'll tell you where the book came from. Alex Houston was Cathy O'Brien's handler for the CIA. He's a CIA operative, drug runner, pedophile, money launderer, as well as slave runner. And even though he did not orchestrate Cathy O'Brien's activities for the most part, he was responsible for making sure that she was in certain places at certain times. As you all have discussed earlier, I'm sure, there are codes, keys, and triggers that are necessary for someone to know in order to access, very much like getting into a computer program, in order to access the mind of one of these programmed individuals, such as Cathy was, you need to know the codes, keys, and triggers. I was aware of this because of a general in the military that had informed me that somewhere Alex Houston must have a record book where it'll say record book on it, and it would indeed contain some of her codes, keys, and triggers. Well, I knew that Alex had a large safe in his home. Very, very old, but extremely large professional bank-type safe. And that I knew, too, that Cathy O'Brien had a photographic memory, so that if she had ever seen the combination even once, it would be recorded in her mind. But unfortunately, I was rather disturbed that she could not tell left from right, and usually, so many turns left and so many turns right. Well, that did pose to be a little bit of a problem, so I just simply reversed the process. But I was able to access in Cathy's memory the actual combination to the safe. And when we opened up the safe, this book, a central record book, did indeed come out of that safe.
What means central? This is book by some central?
Oh, I think you can buy these books. They're record books. I think you can buy them most anywhere. But like many CIA operatives, they normally stay with the same theme, and so everything on it will either say Central or CIA or CCA or something of that nature. But contained within the pages of this book was much more than codes, keys, and triggers. As a matter of fact, there were very few codes, keys, and triggers in here. What was important, though, were offshore bank account numbers, numbers of persons high up in politics, like Bill Clinton. And at the time that I got this book, Bill Clinton was only running for the office of president. I didn't realize that he had been destined to be placed in that office. But there are a lot of drug dealing, a lot of South African telephone numbers and bank drops. Ways to launder money, primarily, are in this book. But,
you just mentioned Bill Clinton. Can you please show me the page where...
Kathy, where's the page? She can find it very quickly.
Where Bill Clinton's name is there and his telephone number was there, which I believe some people they've been using, they could be...
Yes, this one.
I want to face this with the camera. Bill Clinton. And if I could recall the number 859 through the lens on my camera, 6641. Was
Correct.
that?
That's correct.
Was that number in his country home?
Yes, in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. So what is it down on the top? Let me give it again because I just want to show my viewers. There was some.
It says prospective dealers, and actually what that meant in code is the fact that Bill Clinton was not a dealer, but a consumer of cocaine.
So, Kathy, you can recall, and I believe you testified on some occasions on Bill Clinton's using cocaine. You testified that you brought him the cocaine. And can you describe me this time and time frame and what was happened?
1978 was the first time that I've delivered cocaine into the state of Arkansas at Mena Airport.
With whom you was there at the time? With whom you was there?
My first mind control handler, which was Wayne Cox. Wayne Cox.
The man who as a child with you, was chosen to be your father of your child. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, and he was also involved in the mercenary operations that were under the direction of Louisiana Senator J. Bennett Johnston. And these mercenaries, as I was saying, would go to South America or wherever.
The officers of the army and
bring back the planes would bring back the drugs. This one particular airplane load of drugs was transferred into a van, driven into the state of Arkansas, and delivered to the Mena Airport area. I only knew it as a remote airport in Ouachita Forest in the state of Arkansas, and it's since been identified exactly as Mena Airport. But I delivered some cocaine directly to Bill Clinton.
What quantity you were talking about? What quantity of cocaine you were talking about?
Just a small personal amount at that time.
Like 1 kilo or something?
Wasn't that much. I don't believe it was that much.
So where was the place of delivery?
It was at a hotel that was right nearby there, where Bill Clinton was staying at that time.
Do you remember the name of the hotel by any chance?
No, I don't.
So it was a small hotel?
It wasn't like a conventional motel with like a Holiday Inn kind of something. It wasn't like that. It was an older stone motel.
It's actually the place that she's identified. She did so for some investigators with the Kenneth Starr Investigative Committee for Congress. And although I apologize, I don't have photographic memory recall, they did tell me what the name of the place was. It is it was at one time it was built during the 20s, and it was used for hunting, as a hunting fishing lodge, motel type of thing, but has long since been used as a retreat for various Christian groups and this sort of thing. But yes, it's in existence and it's there in the Ouachita Forest.
We'll be able to recall this hotel when you'll be able to see this hotel now.
Right, I can
Kelly?
get photographs of it.
Now to come back to this topic, you brought there, you came in his room, right? He was
Yes,
there?
Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas at that time. He was for a very brief period of time. Then later he became governor for an extended period.
How the situation was looking like? You brought him this cocaine to his room, right?
Yes.
Or...
Yes, along with a message from J. Bennett Johnston, because this was from Johnston's personal stash of cocaine that he was sharing with Clinton, because it was supposedly extra good cocaine. Bill Clinton snorted 2 lines of it then and did...
He did in front of you? He opened the package?
Yes, and told me to tell his friend Ben, as he referred to him, that the cocaine was excellent, so it was real good. So I did. That was the first time I witnessed him using cocaine, and I did have occasion to see him using it throughout the Reagan Bush administration.
So that was your first occasion that you met in person with Bill Clinton, is that correct?
Yeah.
Did you testify on that to some committee or any organization like FBI or whatever?
The information was turned over to the ones that Mark just mentioned.
To the what was the organization? I'm sorry.
The Starr Committee. It's Kenneth Starr. He's been appointed by Congress to investigate the Whitewater and as well as Mena, Arkansas affair. His group is rather large. They've come down with several indictments. They've already forced Hillary Clinton to have to testify.
It's official group by the Congress. It's
yes,
official organization.
yes.
And you testify together, or Kathy?
No, our testimony thus far has not been made public. This is the first even mention of it publicly.
The other reports that we did, we've turned this information over to all aspects of law enforcement.
When this testimony was taking place, exactly what time, and you have a frame time, and when was happened, which year?
The first testimony was this, along with some other physical evidences that Alex Houston was in the cocaine business, and that was given by myself to the FBI in Anchorage, Alaska in 1989. 1989.
Who was the person in charge that took this evidence from you?
Ken Marischal.
Ken Marischal was FBI special agent?
Yes, he was in charge at that time of that particular office. I also reported this information to United States Customs Enforcement in Anchorage, Alaska. But since no crimes had been committed in the Alaskan jurisdiction, they were not permitted to investigate it, only to forward the information on to Washington and to the respective areas that I was reporting where crimes had been committed. Kathy then gave testimony to the local Anchorage Police Department for the FBI on camera in 1989 with regards to Alex Houston's abuse of her daughter, herself, and in addition to that, some information regarding the drug dealing. But at that time, Kathy had not recovered her memories yet, beyond a certain point. In 1990, we also gave testimony to the United States Department of Defense Special Investigations, known as the Defense Intelligence Agency. A representative from the Huntsville, Alabama regional office came to my mother's home just outside of Nashville, Tennessee. And there Kathy gave more recorded testimony.
What was his name? Do you remember?
You know, it's in the book.
Oh, I see.
But I don't recall it offhand.
We reported all these crimes to so many people, and on every turn we were stopped for reasons of national security. It's also interesting to note at that time, when we were reporting these crimes, that the U.S. Attorney General of the Justice Department here was Dick Thornburg. Dick Thornburg was a primary victimizer of mine. He's heavily involved in the white slavery cocaine operations. He was, at that time, governor of the state of Pennsylvania, and during the bulk of my victimization. But by the time that I was reporting the crimes of my victimization, he was the U.S. Attorney General, which meant that he shut down the any investigations for reasons of national security from all aspects of the, especially on the federal end, from Customs, FBI, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the U.S. Army's CID investigations, really just all aspects of law enforcement that we reported to, and we went to everybody. Dick Thornburg was right in a position there. Dick Thornburg's name is also in this diary.
Yes,
Can I just
right
have
here.
it for my audience?
Is that,
Yes, this was for a kilo of cocaine that Alex collected off of him. He delivered the cocaine to him, or Kathy did, and
Thornburg, $18,000.
yes.
So did you deliver this particular cocaine to him personally, or?
oh yeah, there was
Many.
many
You
deliveries.
remember seeing him, right, personally?
Oh, many
times.
times.
She was with him
Many
sexually.
You also have sexual relations?
Yes.
He was, so you was having with him. Another aspect.
Oh, I'm sorry. That kid over there is agitating that dog.
This was
Kathy, you have a list of people that you, what is, how you could call this list? You have a list of the New World Order and list of cocaine handler for CIA or drug dealers. Can you tell us the
That's
substance
the
of the list?
perpetrators, I think, is what she refers
Yeah, I
to.
refer to them as the perpetrators. Yes, it's an extensive list, but it's still only a partial list. And it has names like the former CIA director, Bill Casey,
He was also part of this cocaine operation.
and the white slavery. And he was one of the most integral parts of the Order of the Rose merging of the CIA and the Catholic Vatican that I'm aware of. His ties into the Jesuit aspect of this were extensive. It's my understanding from childhood and right on up through Bill Casey that the Catholic Church wanted to be the one world church. That was their ultimate goal. And when Ronald Reagan
To surpass other beliefs and just to make every church to be Catholic, in other words, Orthodox Church or...
and
What is your knowledge about that? In which respect you came to this conclusion?
well, I came to the conclusion from childhood when the former governor of Michigan, George Romney, and then Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Trudeau, were talking. Pierre Trudeau was Catholic Jesuit, and they were discussing the emergence of information back then from what the information that the Catholic Vatican had on the effects of trauma on the human mind that was supposedly stored in the Catholic Vatican. That was the
Library, I
first
presume.
introduction to that. Bill Casey was right on up through the Reagan administration, so often I heard of this merging and how the Catholic Church would be the one world church. Ronald Reagan told Brian Mulrooney at that cocktail party at the White House that we were discussing earlier, that he believed that the only way to world peace was through mind control of the masses. When he stated this, it was also a play on words, the play on the word masses. They believed that people could be manipulated through the church, because if the church leaders were delivering this, the orders under this new world order, then the people would interpret it as information from God and supposedly do exactly what they were told to do. So it was mind manipulation in that regard, but mind control of the masses was also in reference to the populace as a whole. So it was more or less a play on words. Brian Mulrooney was part of the Jesuit aspect of things. So to him, it was quite humorous the way that Reagan.
How many times that he was sexually abusing you? Or how times you was actually offered to him? How many? To Maroney.
To Mulrooney, on 2 occasions. He was not one of my primary abusers.
Which occasions talking about? Which can you recall these occasions and the year frame or?
The one that we discussed earlier
Yes.
at the White House, and another time on the Canadian side at Niagara Falls. And
Who brought you there to him the second time?
Alex Houston.
Again?
Alex Houston. It was still traveling under the guise of the country music industry. That was our cover. That was our excuse for traveling throughout the United States, Mexico, the Caribbean, and Canada.
And now, to come back to this list, you collected the names and people that you met during your time of your cover-up with drug business or drug trafficking. Can you please tell us the rest of this name that you have on this list? Can you just read for me, please?
Other names include Saudi Arabian King Fahd.
This regarding to New World Order members, right?
Yes.
Yes, these are. I can give you the Order of the Rose New World Order names. I've highlighted them on this particular list, and it's also full of particular drug lords that are not Order of the Rose but are aware of it, such as Jose Busto of San Juan, Puerto Rico.
Start first with Order of the Rose and the people that was there, and your classification on that.
The U.S. diplomat Philip Habib, U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, who was a primary programmer of mine, U.S. Congressman Guy Vanderjack, Tommy Lasorda of the L.A. Dodgers. He has the baseball team here that the Dodgers, they were using mind control in it. Plus he was Catholic connected and was very much a part of the Order of the Rose. Former U.S. drug czar and Secretary of Education during the Reagan administration, Bill Bennett. Bill Bennett is very much a part of the Order of the Rose. He's a mind control programmer, and his brother, Bob Bennett, is a so-called attorney who is also part of this global effort. Saudi Arabian Ambassador Prince Bandar bin Sultan, who I understand has since become King of Saudi Arabia. Former Tennessee Governor Lamar Alexander, George Bush Jr., Michael Dante, who was the chief pornographer for Ronald Reagan. In essence, what that amounted to is he did a lot of covert filming to compromise politically affluent people by their perversions from having had the films on them. Hank Cochran is a singer-songwriter in the country music industry in Nashville, Tennessee, who was one of the primary people in the CIA's cocaine operation. He's also aware of the Order of the Rose. This Order of the Rose group was a small group. It was an elite group at the very top, and it was mostly the world leaders. Aside from that, there were several people who were aware of it, but were not actually a part of it or privy to all that was going on there, such as our former Defense Secretary, Dick Cheney.
He was not member. Dick Cheney was not member of the Order of the Rose.
And not that I was aware of. He could have been, but it was not my experience to witness him being an actual part of it. There's U.S. Congressman Gary Ackerman of New York, U.S. Congressman Jim Traficant of Ohio, General Manuel Noriega of Panama was well aware of the Order of the Rose. I'm not sure whether he was actually a part of it or not. He was certainly a part of the CIA's drug operations during the Reagan-Bush administration that I was aware of.
Did you met him personally?
Yes, I have.
Which occasion you met Noriega?
The primary occasion that I met him was in December of 1987. And
where was that?
It was in Tampa, the Tampa area of Florida, which was real close to MacDill Air Force Base. It was actually just across the bay from MacDill Air Force Base, which is a very primary hub for the cocaine operations of the CIA. Also,
who brought you to him, and how you can describe this meeting with him, and can you describe where you met him, and which it was a hotel room or some other or base?
No, actually, he had his ship out in that harbor area. He has this enormous yacht. I guess it's actually referred to as a yacht. I really don't know where the difference would come in between a ship and a yacht. His was so big. But there was an enormous party that was going on his yacht at that time. I was brought in for the purposes of delivering a message from Ronald Reagan pertaining to his blatant cocaine activities since Iran-Contra was in full swing at that time and was very scandalous in this country and had a lot of media coverage. The orders to Noriega at that time were for him to just, be quieter about the operations, to go underground with them, and to cease, the blatant activities that he was.
Can you recall exactly what order you gave him, what kind of symbol you used for that, or language?
Primarily, what was done is there was U.S. Senator Alan Simpson of Wyoming was the director of the operation. It was called Operation Shell Game, and this was an effort to have Noriega cease his blatant activities. It was done through terror tactics, where Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino was brought onto the ship as well. I did see Oliver North downstairs while I was being taken upstairs to Noriega. There was, I was used in.
Can you use this? Can you try to recall this picture how you was brought to his room inside, or how it looks like?
Yes, I was given specific orders to be on a dock, to be picked up by a little boat, which would take me to his yacht. This little.
Who brought you there to this
boat? I don't know. Somebody that had, it would look like a little speedboat type
dinghy. No, who brought you there, and a person that brought you there to Florida?
Alex Houston.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Alex Houston then flew off elsewhere to carry out his own business, while I was left there to carry out these particular orders.
So you gave him a message from Reagan, in other words?
Yes.
What was the message? Do you remember the message?
Yes. Not verbatim right at the moment. It is recorded in the book verbatim, though. It is in Transformation of America verbatim. My memory now, I would have to go into like a self-meditative trance to recall verbatim, and I don't choose to do that at this particular time, but the message in essence was that the imminent lifting of the veil over all of them from Iran-Contra was going to expose the CIA's cocaine activities if Noriega didn't cease his blatant activities now. He was told that he would be covered, that he would be protected from any exposure unless he continued on the course that he was. And he I guess he chose to
So
continue.
you gave him this message personally,
Yeah.
right? Per se, you stayed next to him in his chair or his
No,
room?
what had happened was I was brought to his yacht. I was given a coded pass key, which was a shell that was swirled into the design of an eye. It's an actual shell that's found on the beaches in that area.
Mm-hmm.
I presented the shell. There's also the shell of what they referred to as a baby's ear.
Mm-hmm.
That was very traumatic, that was used to signal my involvement in this particular Operation Shellgate. That was my pass key onto the ship when I presented it. Once I was cleared the guards, and he had armed guards, Noriega had armed guards on his ship. Once I was cleared past them, I was escorted upstairs to what appears to be like a black smoke mirror windows of the very top floor, which is where I was to meet with Noriega. Alan Simpson was already up there.
So he was there present when you
Yeah.
was there?
Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino was there. And in essence, they did a modified version of the hands-on mind control demonstrations that I was forced to participate in on the various military bases and NASA installations across this country. That was where the term presidential model came from. In essence, they were demonstrating the latest forms of mind control to people. And this was a modified version of that presentation. And this was done to Noriega to show him not only the latest technologies in mind control, but also to play on his occult superstitions. It was done to terrify him into believing that he would have the wrath of Satan himself on him if he didn't comply with Reagan's orders. He was very terrified by the whole presentation and had run hollering from the room. So the effect was definitely there. The trauma that he endured on his superstitious beliefs, coupled with the message that was delivered verbatim, including the exact voice inflections that have been programmed with, should have been sufficient to force him into containing his operations on a more subtle basis. Somehow, I don't know why or how or what happened, but apparently he didn't do it, and that was Bush's, when he went and raided Panama on the so-called Operation Just Cause, when they brought Noriega into this country. And I guess he remains a political prisoner here to date. But that was done because he was skimming profits off the CIA drug money that I'm aware of. And
How was you aware of this scheme process?
because of the transactions that I was involved in on his aspect of this cocaine operation out of the Caribbean, I knew that the money would turn up short and that he had already been accused of skimming.
Who was about to pick up the money from him? You was in charge of that, or?
At times I was a part of that that particular aspect. So that was how I was aware that he was already skimming. But I was also aware that more than anything, his activities were not being kept secret enough to suit the CIA at that time. They had been so blatant about their cocaine activities up to that point that they did have to quieten them down during the Iran-Contra investigations.
I see. So in which respect you was collecting money? So they brought this money through the ships and delivered to you, and you was bringing this money where?
Well, Oftentimes it was part of the Caribbean operations. I would travel on the Norwegian Caribbean lines, NCL, out of Key Biscayne, Florida, that would go to various ports of call throughout the Caribbean and Mexico. And that was another means of travel for the country music industry. Alex Houston, as a so-called entertainer, ventriloquist, stage hypnotist in the country music industry, would be brought onto the ship to entertain. I was brought on with him as a handwriting analyst that gave lectures on the cruise ship. And then when we were in certain ports of call, then the CIA's drug operations were carried out at that time.
Which means, can you explain it from a technical
I
point
would
of view?
have a large suitcase full of money in the early 80s. As things progressed and on into the later 80s, most was delivered as bank transaction numbers and codes instead that I was programmed with, rather than the actual physical money transfer. But early on, the money was actually taken in a suitcase to key places, Key West, Florida, for example, where the operations were in full swing there. Some into Mexico. A lot of heroin was actually brought out of Mexico during that point in time through NCL. The
NCL is what?
Norwegian Caribbean line.
Oh, okay.
It's a luxury cruise ship. Jose Busto in San Juan, Puerto Rico was a very integral part of the Caribbean operations and would clear the CIA involved people such as myself, where the legitimate immigrations or legitimate customs inspections were circumvented so that he could actually get the drugs taken off the ship through the cargo area instead, so that they would be undetected.
There was cover-up for everybody was taking part of that.
Very much. NCL was completely, totally involved in the drug operations at that time. Then the drugs were transferred onto the motorhome that Alex Houston and I had driven down to the cruise ship, while we were on our cruise. We would then take the money that had been...
So you went with that particular vehicle to the ship inside, or you just take these drugs and all in this truck? How you describe that? How you had the drugs in that motor vehicle, right? In that.
The suitcase that carried the money was exchanged for suitcases full of drugs, or the drugs were sometimes transferred on in these big food storage bins of the cruise lines. But once we arrived back in port in Florida, the drugs were then transferred to the motorhome. The motorhome had been specifically made where it had hollow walls for holding the drugs. The drugs were then put into the walls of the motorhome and driven back into either Nashville, Tennessee, the drug drop in Ohio that I mentioned earlier, the drug drop in Kentucky, Diamond Cavern that I mentioned earlier, or possibly to different military bases along the way.
I see. So now the other names that you're mentioning in this list, who they are? You mentioned also somehow Saddam Hussein there. In which respect?
Yes, that was Saddam Hussein was mentioned, and that was more from being considered a stepping stone of the New World Order. He was considered expendable. He was set up. The whole Desert Storm war, from what I was privy to, what I was aware of, was simply a setup. As a matter of fact, I had delivered a message to Saudi Arabian King Fahd that the arming of Iraq was just a, quote, mirage in the whirlwind, where
Which year are you talking about?
that Saddam Hussein would be stopped eventually.
Which year are you talking about?
This was in 1986, I believe.
86.
86, they were already arming Iraq with biological warfare weaponry, and that was what I was aware of in particular.
But the purpose was to attack Iran, I presume, right, at the time? Or?
At the time, in the arming of Iraq, it was so that Saddam Hussein would continue, according to George Bush, what I heard George Bush say.
When you heard him saying that?
At Bohemian Grove, right about that same period of time. When I saw him there, he was discussing how Saddam Hussein should be allowed to continue genocide in his country, so that there would be, quote, that much less for Bush to have to annihilate when the war was actually broke out. And in the meantime, Saudi Arabian King Fahd was being soothed and to understand that the building of Iraq was not going to affect Saudi Arabia directly, supposedly, was not going to affect them directly or be a threat to them because Saddam Hussein was destined to be disarmed. The war was imminent. And this was, back in the late 80s that all this was already established. So when Desert Storm actually came about, it was, it didn't seem like war as the public perceived it at all to me. It was so staged. It was so orchestrated. But Saddam Hussein was definitely considered an expendable. Baby Doc Duvalier of Haiti was also considered an expendable. They used Haiti as a cocaine hub for many years before that particular aspect of the cocaine.
Did you have met Baby Doc?
On numerous occasions.
Where was the first time that you met with him?
I met with him in Haiti at his presidential palace in Port-au-Prince. And
who brought you there?
Alex Houston.
You
and
flew
this
there,
was
right?
through the Norwegian Caribbean line.
Oh, you went with the crew there.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Many drug transactions had occurred there before Baby Doc was taken out of power. When Baby Doc was taken out of power, I was aware of Haiti being used as a prototype of mass genocide for the New World Order, according to New World Order plans, and was...
In which respect mass genocide? Through the civil wars or through the conflict among the nation in this country or various groups, or how you understood that genocide aspect of the New World Order?
Through AIDS, mind control of the masses.
What do you mean by AIDS? Do you mean AIDS was implanted there, or?
By everything that I know, and it is detailed in the book, it was deliberately brought into Haiti to, as George Bush said, this is to quote him only, he said to annihilate the niggers at their source. Mm-hmm. And in other words...
it was also in Bohemian Grove?
Yes.
What was
and
Bohemian
Grove? He was
Grove?
also referring to South Africa at that time.
What was the Bohemian Grove actually role in that whole story? I read your book, but Bohemian Grove was a place where all these people belonging to this club attending. Are they all members of the Rose or one way or another, or just some of them?
No. There's Bohemian Grove was a political playground in Northern California, and it's still there today. It's not far from the Presidio, where the so-called Gorbachev USA summit was held. The people that met at Bohemian Grove had two levels that, according to my understanding. One level was the usual membership. The other level was the elite, politically affluent members of the Grove, which included George Bush, Bill and Bob Bennett, Gerald Ford, to name a few, Ronald Reagan.
Kissinger as well?
I understand that Kissinger is a member, but it was not my experience to have contact with him there. It was my experience to have contact with Dick Cheney.
Do you have any knowledge of this operation when Gorbachev was there? There was also some kind of conversation you heard between Bush referring to Gorbachev and all this operation to do Russia, to cut off Russian Union, or to convince Gorbachev on that?
The only aspect of it that I was aware of at all, as far as Gorbachev and that effort, was just a shared goal of implementing the New World Order. I do not know the details. I'm not privy to that aspect of it because my operations were limited primarily to Canada, Mexico, Caribbean.
So you never have a chance to see when Gorbachev was there or anything like that?
No, I was free at that time. I was no longer a mind-controlled slave. It was no longer operational.
Oh, I see.
But the Presidio is a well-known abuse base. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino has been charged with sexual abuse of children there for the proliferation of his occult temple of Set, for the blood ritual traumas that occur there. I was taken there for mind control programming purposes. There's a mind control sophisticated technology building that's located on the Presidio. And the Presidio, like I said, is in close proximity to the Bohemian Grove. So it all kind of intertangles. The same people are involved in both places.
Can you give me some more detail about these names that you have there, like drug dealers and drug traffickers and slaves? You have quite a list there.
Yes.
Other pages, I believe.
Boxcar Willie is a country music entertainer. George Bush Jr. is listed for his operation.
Do you have a knowledge you met with him?
Yes.
Who was the man? How do you describe this man?
George Bush Jr. Took Kelly off on several occasions.
You mean sexually abused her?
From all indications that I saw when Kelly was returned, I would have to say yes. For his support of his father's sexual assault of Kelly, yes. George Bush Jr. was covering for his father.
What is his second name, first name of George Bush Jr.? Also George Bush Jr.,
yes.
Right? He's now, what is his position now?
I believe he's governor of Texas.
Oh, I see.
At this point.
I see.
But when I knew him, he was, this was back in 1986. He was at the Mount Shasta compound. He was also at Ronald Reagan's, I don't know if it's a primary home or a second home or whatever, but it's a home in California that I was...
You met with him?
Yes.
Do you have anything, any relation, sexual whatsoever with him, or?
None whatsoever, and no indicators that he was interested in any kind of sexual relations. The only interest that I ever saw him show was towards my daughter. I did not witness him sexually assaulting my daughter.
Did you witness anyone? Did you witness? Ever been eyewitness of any of assault of your daughter by that you saw by your eyes? You saw with your eyes?
Yes.
When it's happened and how it's happened?
That was after Kelly and I had been caught in the most dangerous game on Mount Shasta, and were taken into the hunting lodge, cabin, whatever you'd want to call it.
That was in California, or?
Yes, in Northern California. And Dick Cheney and George Bush were on vacation, kind of a work vacation at the time, because it was close to the Christmas holidays and they were off work. George Bush was using copious quantities of heroin that I witnessed him using.
He was using heroin?
Heroin, yes.
Which way? Through the needle? Or?
Yes. And there was also opium that was smoked in that room. There was...
Who, Cheney was with him?
Yes, yes. And
which room? Can you describe the room and the place?
The room was... it was set up like redwood walls, and it was very rustic. The whole room was set up in a mirrored type illusion where everything, like there was a sofa facing a sofa. They were both black leather, and they looked exactly the same, and they were facing each other. Two armchairs were positioned opposite each other, so that it appeared to be, in looking in the room, the whole room appeared to be a mirror reflection, but it was simply actually designed that way. Because, like, George Bush was sitting in one chair and Dick Cheney was sitting in the other.
They were naked?
When Kelly and I were brought in.
They were naked?
Eventually, yes. When we first came in, no. But they did both unzip their pants and were making lewd remarks to Kelly and I both. Both of them were very high on the heroin and the drugs that were there. It was their recreational drugs of choice, and they were very abusive of Kelly and I both.
So what they did exactly? Just they did oral sex, or they just penetrate you sexually?
George Bush, after a series of perverse and lewd comments and events, had gotten up and walked over to Kelly and had put his penis in her mouth momentarily, and then he took her off to another room, which was nearby. It was a bedroom that was right off this room, and from that bedroom I heard Kelly hollering in pain. George Bush had made comments to Dick Cheney at that time.
From that room?
He liked it when children felt the pain and squirmed and hollered. And then I heard that going on, while at the same time Dick Cheney had taken me down in front of the fireplace. There was a fireplace in the room, and had sexual intercourse with me there that was extremely brutal because of his abnormally large penis size, but also because
what kind of penis size? He has like very big penis there? Or
yeah, very, very large, very thick. The complete opposite end of the scale of Senator Byrd, that's for sure. Very brutal in his sexual assault. He's aware of his size being painful, and he would dislocate my jaw to sexually gratify himself in my throat, and he would actually slide my jaw out of joint, and I have permanent damage to my jaw from Dick Cheney's sexual assault alone because of his unusual size. So that was a very traumatic event. The whole thing was horrible enough to have actually shattered some programming that I had at that time, and I had to be reprogrammed at the Presidio following that traumatic event. As we drove from the Lake Shasta area that we had driven to, we were taken by helicopter to Mount Shasta. So when this was over, we were transported again by helicopter back to Lake Shasta where the motorhome was. And at that time, Kelly was literally dying. She was unable to breathe. She was running a very high temperature. She couldn't move. Her kidneys and her whole back were hurt from George Bush's sexual assault.
Thank you. Friend, and I believe friend to life, and Mark, and I'm very sorry to ask you these questions, and I feel even the first time we met very unpleasant about that, but this is a part of my trial to explain and to people that have skepticism about all these things, all this trauma how you describe this trauma that happened to you, how they've been working and experimentizing on you, what is the size they've been using. Can you give us some more guideline on that?
On how they perform different...
How they perform different trauma on you from the beginning.
There was sleep, food, and water deprivation that usually occurred for 3 days prior to any particular programming session or any particular operation that I had to carry out. The water deprivation was especially difficult, especially in the Caribbean or any hot places.
Which places, when you talk about that, if you'd be so kind, I know that you have a problem with remembering everything, but just tell us which places you're referring to.
In the Caribbean?
Yes.
Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. There was what was called an out island for NCL. It's a small, remote island, not too far from the Bahamas and not too far from Key West. This little island was really the most active drug operation. I saw Noriega at that island. It's also got the radio control towers for airplanes for the drug operations. It's got radio control for the ships, so that if there was anything really significant going on a different island, they could actually detour the ship for whatever reason, excuse they gave, bad weather, whatever, to go to those other islands, because the main purpose of NCL was the CIA cocaine operation. So they had that one little out island, and it was called Stirrup Cay.
When you can recall the beginning of your torture as a child, I presume, and when was that, if you can recall it, and how that was performed? Can you give us some kind of, completely analysis from the beginning of your torture, time that you can recall?
There's
except the fact that you was abused by your father.
Yeah, the sexual abuse, of course, and then I witnessed a murder by my father when I was about 3 years old. That was there was no way to really understand all about death even then to me. I was so small, but it was very traumatic just the same, because the man was shot. He had stumbled onto our camp while we were camping out on the high banks near Muskegon, Michigan, and it was hunting season, and he was a hunter, and he had happened to stumble onto our camp while my father was passing us kids around the campfire to my other uncles who were also sexually abusing us.
So in other words, your father was having sex with you and your brother?
Yes, when this guy happened to accidentally stumble onto the campsite.
Mm-hmm.
And when he realized what he saw, he turned to run, and my father shot him.
Was your father ever prosecuted for that?
No, not at all. Not at all. There was no problems that arose from that I was ever aware of at all. It certainly created more problems in my mind. So that was very traumatic. There were numerous traumas like that, and like my daughter's abuse, that were especially difficult psychological traumas to deal with. The psychological traumas are far more devastating than physical trauma. To me, I have no fear now. I was asked one time by a customs agent, he said, "Aren't you afraid they'll get you and torture you now?" I said, I'm not afraid of that at all, because I know how far torture goes. It only goes so far, and then it doesn't matter anymore. Physical torture, I know what the experience is like and how far it goes. My body still bears a lot of scars from the physical tortures. The stun gun has left moles and prod marks in my skin, on my back and my arms and my legs. My head has been caved in. The skull is...
Who was performing that on you?
Different people were using the stun guns, sometimes Secret Service, sometimes, especially Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, Philip Habib, Alex...
Who was Philip Habib?
Philip Habib was Reagan's attaché. He was some kind of international diplomat. I don't fully understand exactly what his operations were, although I know what his agenda was, and it was New World Order. So there were quite a few people that used.
I'm sorry. Now, talking about this torture, Mark, you have one of the weapon that Kelly described before. Can you tell us more? And Kelly, can you tell me how they use this on you?
Well, this is one variety. There are many varieties of these things. Uses usually a 9-volt battery and converts it from 100 to 210,000 volts DC current. It's quite powerful. You can see the blue spark there.
Mm-hmm.
And what it does is it instantly constricts all your muscles in your body to where you have no ability to holler, to make a noise. All you do is go straight to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's done very quickly, you'll see like a flash of light in behind your eyes.
How did it affect you, Kelly? How they performed this on you? It was the same thing they've been using on you?
Yes, that's one example of it. There's another cylindrical kind that was used internally. It was a vaginal prod that was, I think, a lower voltage, so I was more aware or could feel the pain of it, whereas if I was hit with a higher voltage stun gun, it usually was a matter of things going black and going down.
This creates flu-like symptoms. You get after about 10 seconds of administering this, what you wind up having is someone who is usually constricted on the ground. They're disoriented. They do not know where they are. They don't know what time of day it is. They don't know anything because their brain sugar has instantly been reduced to the point to where they're delirious. If you hold it on much longer than 20 seconds, all you're going to do is the person is going to be out for several minutes. And when they do recover, their mobility is impaired to the point to where they can't fight, run, do much of anything.
My other question is to you, pointed out, Mark, one of the people asked me a question, one of the editors, why you don't publish your book by some publisher.
Well,
It was a very interesting question that I would like you to have today respond. I could not get the answer because we didn't know each other so much. I believe your story from the beginning, and I would like to have this answer from you.
In the United States, there are laws which protect so-called freedom of speech, particularly if you are a party to an action. And since I was a party to this action, and since I had been threatened and the threats had been documented, the threats coming from the federal government or representatives of the United States government, it made me a party to the action of exposing this atrocity. Had I permitted someone else to publish the book, and we had many publishers that were willing to publish it and pay us well for publishing it, I would have lost the ability to have maintained the content of the book itself, and I would also have lost the book itself. There have been several people to publish books similar to what Cathy and I have published, and the CIA just simply comes in and buys the rights and buys
Probably
the books
to cover up people.
and literally removes them from the shelves of the bookstores, and that's the end of it. There's no more available.
So your aspect was not exactly to make money, to make sensation out of it. And that's the reason that I felt you both to be in the very same, because my motive is to expose that mind control operation of humans as something very dangerous, and something has to be punished all over the world through the media, and I will do my best in my effort to do so. But I'm very glad to hear that kind of answer from you, that you are not particularly gain was to get money out of it and to be a rich man and to get out of it.
At several points in the past 8 years, Cathy and I could have sold our story, and if we agreed to be silent, we could have sold it, and she would have had enough money to have lived off of the rest of her life, and I could have recovered my life I invested more in this than anyone would be willing to pay me, frankly, because I was willing to do it, and I did it willingly. But there's no amount of money that can silence us. That's for certain. It can't happen.
Another aspect that I noticed is, as a man who is following now, we became friends, and I'm really very much listening, and I really appreciate your company, was the way how you met together, and the way that you simply dedicated your future life to something that you didn't know about, and what will be happen out of it, something that is very dangerous, but your probably inside soul and inside instinct tells you that maybe that is your dedication to the humanity that you somehow to your previous job didn't get as satisfactory, I believe.
Well, as you know, during the late 60s and early 70s, I was exposed to, as a United States Department of Defense subcontractor, I was exposed to some MK Ultra or mind control experimentation, legitimate experimentation that didn't involve torture. It did not involve any sort of trauma. It was more in line with rehabilitating criminals and people involved in mental institution settings. Also with apes and dolphins. Behavioral modification programs is actually what they were entitled. But what I learned from those experiences and from what my own research led me to believe was that mind control, or external control of the mind, was perhaps the greatest threat to mankind's survival. Certainly it's the last freedom that we have that is not currently being encumbered on a mass scale. It is encumbered on individual scales, like Cathy is telling you. But when presented with the opportunity, and I look at it as an opportunity, VUK, to actually make a positive difference, I found no alternative. There wasn't a choice. Had there been a choice, logically, I would not have done what I did, but there was no choice. The choice was very simple: to rescue Cathy and Kelly and to get this information into the public's ear. I just didn't realize it would take me so long to accomplish this goal.
There were so many government secrets and personal reputations staked on the belief that I couldn't be deprogrammed, and I know I'm extremely fortunate to have survived all of this. But they were wrong in believing that, because they made that belief predicated on their own immoral thought processes, and they're limited in their thinking by their own immorality. They never considered that someone like Mark would use the information that he had for good, to actually help not only me, but to help humanity. But I think the most, if there's a happy ending to this story personally, it would be that we have fallen in love, and the love factor has been very significant in my recovery, because not only did he save my life, but I have certainly have a reason to live it. And the love factor is extremely important. I feel like most people spend their lifetime looking for a love and never find it. And at 38 now, I've got that love, and that's
your emotions
very
back and the
deep.
feeling.
Right.
See, when I was talking to some people, I even described, I was telling a little bit of my expressions. I said this is like a Pygmalion story in a way. Professor and, remember Pygmalion story,
Yes.
My Fair Lady? But in different frame and picture, in different time. I really appreciated very much the way you described me the situations. So can you actually describe me the way you met for the first time and how everything happened? And
First of all, I need to apply just a little bit of history. I had a business with the People's Republic of China and the Chinese military. We were involved in a joint venture company to manufacture large capacitor banks that were used in energy savings for the mining industry. The mining industry was having to shut down every other day because of a lack of electricity. And the mining industry, of course, was controlled by the military over there because it was metal. They have a rather odd arrangement on how they control certain things. But as a result of my agreement, joint venture contracts with the People's Republic of China and the military, they were very concerned about who my business partners were, apparently. And Alex Houston, Cathy O'Brien's handler back in the States, was in fact a business partner of mine. Thank you. Was a business partner of mine, and actually was one of the people that was instrumental in helping me put this company together. I was told by the Chinese intelligence, I was approached by them after the signing of the contract, that I had a partner in the United States, Alex Houston, who was involved in drug trafficking, child and adult prostitution, pornography, money laundering, and it was working for the CIA, and it was sanctioned by the White House, meaning at the highest level.
Which hotel was that? In China? In which place? In China, you remember?
I have the pictures. I'm not sure. Yes, I am too. It was called the International Hotel in Beijing. Is where actually this meeting took place. A secondary meeting took place at a facility in the Shenzhen province in southern China. But the Chinese offered to provide me the funding to buy Alex Houston out, which they provided it. Not only did they give me a $1 million letter of credit through BCCI in New York, but they also provided me with cash to purchase Alex Houston stock. I returned to the United States. I bought Alex Houston stock. I contacted a general friend of mine because of the words mind control being introduced into all this conversation that I'd had with the Chinese intelligence officer. And I explained to him what I was up against, and he told me that mind control, as I knew it from the 60s and 70s research, was fully operational and was saturating the private sector. In other words, the civilians were being abused with it. Well, it was at that point...
It was your friend from CIA who told you that?
Actually, yes, he was CIA, but he was also a high-ranking military official in military intelligence. His connection to the CIA at that time I was not aware of. I've only recently learned that he had CIA connections. He was U.S. military intelligence, which is a separate thing. But this gentleman had tried to convince me that people like Cathy were not helpable, that there was no help available for them, and that once I got her and her daughter out of there, I would just have two insane people on my hands, and I could not possibly help them, even with the knowledge that I'd acquired on this topic. But fortunately, this friend was wrong, because he put me in touch with some other people within U.S. military intelligence who were very cooperative in giving me the information I needed to not only get her out, but also to help put her back together. And
so they've been also
very
engaged in this operation, and
yes.
They knew the technologies and the programming in a way.
Yes, sir. And that's what they provided me as far as the tools to work with. And after working with Cathy about 9 months in Alaska, she had reached a point to where she was not dissociating or going into any sort of trance. She was quite competent, and I felt could withstand the rigors of cross-examination by the federal authorities. So at that point in time, we began in earnest reporting what she had experienced with the proofs that we were able to acquire, which were very limited at that time, and the documents and testimony, which was extremely limited, just to what really I was able to acquire over a few-month period of time. We began to supply that to every single law enforcement agency in the United States that could impact this case, to get it before the people necessary to have it properly investigated and have these perpetrators charged. But we were stopped for reasons of national security. Now the bad guys or the perpetrators, the ones who abused she and her daughter and so many others, are hiding behind the 1947 National Securities Act. The National Security Act is not a necessary provision in our protection of government secrets. We had the rules of ethical military conduct, which protected our nation's secrets since its beginning, and it was quite adequate. What this National Securities Act does, VUK, is that it protects perpetrators at the highest level for any activity. They can do anything. They can run drugs for money. They can have secret parts of the government that they're funding with drugs and other illicit profits. And it's all done under the guise of national security, and there's nothing that a citizen can do as far as getting it into court.
At this point, we keep raising the question in Kelly's case, what does national security have to do with the rape and molestation of a child? Because Kelly has been literally a political prisoner in the custody of the state of Tennessee. She's denied rehabilitation due to the political prominence of her CIA and MK-Ultra abusers. She's waiting for the peace of mind that I know comes with recovery. She's waiting for the day that she'll be free to be herself, and that she'll be free of this blanket of national security that's been allowing for the proliferation of the violation of laws and rights in her case that are, it's absolutely intolerable and it's blatant. She's been a political prisoner for over 5 years, and we're looking forward to the day when we can get the information out on a wide enough scale that Kelly can actually be helped.
Do you believe that, I'm very happy and delightful that tomorrow we're going to meet Kelly, and that we'll be able to talk to her, and you told her that I'm coming, and I believe that we'll have a nice time bringing her for the first time out of this facility.
Yes.
Do you believe, Mark and Kelly, that there is some help for her, that someone will be able, with full knowledge of that destructive technology of controlling of human minds, to work out also with Kelly, even if she was exposed to the project?
There's no technology available in the private sector. Civilians have not been given that technology. In other words, the psychiatrists and the psychologists that are in this country and abroad, I don't know of any of them that have access to the technology that is required, that I'm aware of, to help Kelly.
What is the major difference between Kathy's case and Kelly's case?
It's the amount of scarring on the brainstem that occurred prior to age 5. Kathy was abused sexually, physically, and psychologically, and behaviorally, but Kelly was abused through the use of technology and chemicals. Kelly's abuse goes much more pronounced. The brain damage is much more extensive, and Kelly has a wonderful chance for recovery. A wonderful chance.
She's extremely intelligent, for one.
If in fact we can force this government to at least, and this is what all of this is about, to at least release the equipment that I know is available that would put that child back together, so that she could be a normally functioning adult.
In the meantime, we've nurtured her on a soul level, at the very essence of her being, with love, understanding, and compassion, and also been able to give her an insight and understanding of herself and why she's in the situation that she is, rather than recovered, because her own desire to recover, her own she's so motivated inside to recover that if that could have done it, she'd be there. But she doesn't know why she wasn't able to bring herself to that point. That's not fair that she should even have to think that way. So we hope to get access to some kind of technology that will actually help her stay in control of herself. She says that she longs for the day that she can express herself as she knows she is inside. And it's
Are you definitely positive that there's no access to any more penetration of any kind of influence on her due to the fact that she could be a very dangerous witness to the much more extensive cover-up on her case?
Actually, there is no guarantees. Not for Kelly, not for me, or Kathy, or for that matter, you. But with as much publicity as this case has been given over the past 5 years through law enforcement, legitimate law enforcement, and legitimate mental health in this country and abroad, I would say that the chances of them abusing Kelly at this point are slim to none. It would not be practical. It would be a big red flag.
I was also facing the different questions, so maybe it's very interesting for you to open my heart and to tell you what kind of question I got when I was playing the tape that you gave me and all these books. For the people that have been very superficially facing that, I mean, that means not reading your book or not even being capable from the time point of you to read that, they always thought that should be something that Americans are planning on us, on the way, even in Europe, in Western Europe. But from the others, they asked me, people that are more concerned and they have some knowledge on that, and especially in this field is not only in the United States, the field is probably in Russia, very developed.
Oh, yeah.
In all these
we don't know of
fascistic
any
regimes.
in the world that is not employing the same type of mind control that Kathy experienced. There's no country in the world that's excluded, and that it even goes into some of the most third world primitive societies in Africa.
and such as Haiti.
And Haiti,
Also kind of mind control,
Same
trauma. So now most people say how you're still alive, how knowing the fact how CIA is effective, and as a matter of fact how easy. I was facing a situation in my life trade when I was working on football. I'm probably the most dangerous espionage affair in the world by now, of being threatened and being even tortured one time, and lucky enough I survived that torture. But on the way, knowing such methodology of killing, to kill the person, to eliminate the person, you just need a few experts on that. What kept you alive through these years?
Probably the single greatest support that we received were from friends that I had made, friendships that I had maintained over the years within the intelligence community and within law enforcement. These people have guided my path and Kathy's path safely through this maze of information dissemination. We have disseminated information. We know what kind of secrets to keep and what not to keep. We know what will get you killed and what you can survive with. We have literally passed through the window of opportunities, and we have successfully got this information out in such mass that now, quite honestly, I believe that we're probably safer than most Americans who don't even know about this stuff. I don't feel that we are threatened.
For most of the people that I met, publisher or people from magazines, they ask me questions. Okay, we will publish if it's only a matter of mind control, which people are aware the one way through satanism and other means, but how we can comprehend child abuse with a very famous name in politics.
It's very simple, VUK. There's one common denominator between a child abuser and one who isn't a child abuser. That common denominator is they're both people. And when people are in positions of absolute power, you know that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And sometimes even the most mild-mannered, unperverted person, when they are placed in positions of extreme authority, under extreme pressure, and they develop some very sociopathic attitudes towards their fellow man. And in the process of doing so, express themselves sexually in a very perverted way. Now, this is common knowledge among people who study the mind, psychologists, psychiatrists, and mental health people. They realize that the higher up the ladder of success someone rises, the more perverted their sexuality becomes, and the more criminal-minded they become. This has been known throughout history. So to say that because this person is a famous politician or an entertainer or a musician, it does not make them exempt from perverted behavior. As a matter of fact, it accelerates it. And this is a matter of human nature. So in the past, rock stars, if they were all arrested for drug use, there wouldn't be any rock stars. I mean, there wouldn't be any rock and roll because they'd all be locked up. So why aren't they locked up when they use this stuff openly? Everybody knows they use it. They use it because they buy it. So that means they're buying it, they're selling it, they're using it, and they don't go to prison. It's because of society accepts it. But they will not accept someone sitting in the audience using it while they're watching these rock stars use it. Politicians, on the other hand, pass laws to have perverted persons locked up. But they themselves are practicing the perversions, and they are above the law because they have placed themselves that way. So that's really the only answer that I can think of logically to answer your question.
Other means that other questions I was asking you, or other question was asked from me, from the people that I was showing the film to, was what is the perspective of majority of Americans? Are they aware that they came to the stage of very strange situation, which we know as Orwell 84 book, by Orwell book 84, as total control? We was having a lot of films on that, and it's
right.
Hollywood industry is full of those films. How do you think, because you have access to reality, you have access to be with Cathy, who was actually one of those robots that we was watching even in Hollywood by the time. What is your opinion about this country, where this country is going? Is that phenomena scaring a lot of people in this country?
George Orwell, in 1949, gave us some pretty grim predictions based on some theories that he had developed based on some technology that he knew that were being developed. George Orwell had connections into the intelligence community, both British MI6 as well as CIA. In those days, it was the OSS. George Orwell, when he wrote his books, many of them, he predicted a society which would, through natural evolution, be controlled through its own technology. Secret knowledge equals power. And when you have secret knowledge, technologically speaking, you can control whomever. For instance, the United States is in control of the world at this time due to its technology advancements. Now, technology has a way of not being a tameable or protectable asset. As a matter of fact, more espionage is committed in search of technological secrets than any other single piece of secret knowledge or information that any government or corporation can contain. So secret knowledge is very, very important for control. We as a people are not, as an average American person, are not aware that the government is about 25 to 30 years ahead of us, technologically speaking. Now, VUK, I ask you, the camera that you're working with right now was not even thought of 25 years ago, much less available. So technology, if you removed everything from your life that was not in existence 25 years ago, you would practically remove everything that you have, including some of your clothing, because of technology. Man has got to evolve through this technological breakthrough. We will defy what George Orwell predicted, and which has come true. Big Brother is, in fact, watching us all, but through the use of technology. But mankind will and must evolve through it, or mankind will fail as a species.
From my perspective, people tend to pick and choose what they want to believe of my victimization predicated on their own experience. And in the last 5 years, people can relate to it more because it is their experience. More and more people are affected in some aspect by mind control. They're affected by someone, a loved one that's in special forces with the military, or someone who has been affected by occultism and blood trauma and mind control through that. There's people affected through child abuse scandals that are not seeing any justice in this country. There's people that are most widely affected through the global education process that's been implemented in the school system. That's where the education system has been changed and designed to increase the children's learning capacity while decreasing their ability to critically analyze. It's making them robotic. They come home to their parents as children that their parents don't even recognize anymore. They don't know who those children are.
It's like the young man who goes off and is recruited by the military and then is put into a special forces training, and he comes back and he has no memory of any of his personal life. His parents barely recognize his persona, and his loved ones no longer even know who he is.
Now, this isn't to say that global education is the kind of experience that I had.
No.
My experience was extreme, and I was totally robotic. These kids are coming out of school in a slightly robotic state. They're coming out with a completely different attitude towards life. So there's like a sliding scale of mind control, but nevertheless, more and more people in this country are affected in one way or another. So they are wide open to that reality. Plus, with the erosion of our constitutional values, with our country having been just completely eroded morally and financially, people are opening their eyes a little bit. They're beginning to ask questions and demand answers as to what went on. So they're more ready to accept the information.
Our government has created total chaos in this country by flooding the streets with drugs.
That's
drugs
one.
that are addictive, drugs that are debilitating, and drugs that will capture all of the not only disposable incomes of the lower class, middle class, upper class, but also their entire life savings.
And they know that the CIA is involved in the drug industry. I don't know anybody that doesn't know that in this country. The average drug dealer on the streets, just kids, know that if they're not part of CIA operations, they're going to get busted. So that's the word on in the slums to the kids that are selling drugs on the street corners. So people are aware that there's a big problem in this country.
So what kind of society is a society between slaves and mustard, or which way are we going to? Which way this government is bringing?
Take a look back in history and see what Adolf Hitler's vision was for his New World Order, and that's exactly what we're headed into.
Unless we get the information out. The only defense against mind control is knowledge. They have been operating on the idea that secret knowledge equals power, and in fact that has been true. We need to tell those secrets. That's why Mark and I have written the book. That's why we're getting the information out. That's why we have so many behind us dedicated to getting this information out. People have a right to know and a need to know this information for the sake of humanity as we know it.
How about you appeared in a lot of, how many talk shows you're appearing with, and how many conference you was appearing with?
VUK, I don't have an exact figure. I can guesstimate from the number of years and the number of stops, and just by a drawer full of canceled airline tickets, probably 150 personal appearances, and probably
With Cathy together, right?
oh, always. And probably twice that many radio and television shows, both in the United States and Canada.
When the television shows will be taking place now? Television show?
The TV shots were usually limited to news people coming into seminars and taking 5-minute, 2-minute, 1-minute film clips of what we were talking about. We have done a couple of on-camera interviews with some people, investigative reporters, and those have been aired in various markets. We did one 4-hour segment for a Christian broadcast group, which was aired in 30-minute increments, 8 shows.
You have this on tape here? You have this tape?
Actually, I can get it. The master I have here, I copied it so many times, it's finished. It's a lousy interview.
Okay.
I'm not pleased with it. It was back in the early days where I was unable to say some of the things that we wanted to say because we did not have hard proof or hard testimony, corroborating testimony.
And the media is so controlled and censored. We've had to do this.
Oh, yeah.
We've had to do this a difficult way, making copies and getting information out. And now that we've got the book, at least it's an easier, more comprehensive vehicle for getting the information out of
I mean, you was together with 60 Minutes once, and they were doing a story. What's happened with that segment and how the situation was looking like?
That segment was filmed in California, videotaped, and the interviewer, with tears in his eyes, told Cathy that someday her story will be told, but not now. In other words, and off camera, I asked him, I said, where is this tape going? He said, it's going back to 60 Minutes. I said, who is it for? He said, why? I said, who is it for? He said, it's for the CIA. They want to see what you're talking about.
My very similar experience, talking about 60 Minutes, I was sent to 60 Minutes to the very distinguished gentleman that I respect, David Weiner of New York Times, who discovered a very similar self-inflicted terrorist act by the Muslim in Sarajevo, which was used as pretext for bombing of the Serbs, even that everybody knew that was not done by that. But I was also with 60 Minutes. I was with Don Hewitt, walking legend of American journalism. I was showing to his producer, one of them was Jeff Fegger, who I mentioned in one of the film, which was actually airing to them as maybe last honest story about American journalism, was a story about Kuwaiti's daughter, Kuwaiti ambassador, who was 1 month pretending to be a witness from the Kuwait and how kids were killed, and Bush was, even knowing the fact that she was daughter of Kuwaiti ambassador, quoting her statements. Don Hewitt went for half an hour to inform himself from CIA. He came back and he said, your story is right. I cannot air your story because they will damage the whole industry of media. They will damage the whole thing. So I'm very sorry. That is the biggest challenge I ever had. It's the biggest conspiracy that I heard of. But I'm sorry I cannot make it. End of discussion. So I understand that some topics will never, but I hope that this topic will be very soon aired in the future and they will do something about that.
Well, it's happening now. As I mentioned earlier, we've had more press, good, solid press, interested in what we're talking about in the last 5 months than we've had in the last 8 years. And we are, in fact, winning.
I think it's the people's demand for answers that's causing the media to start coming around, because people have gone totally to alternative media, the radio and shortwave, and what they call underground newspapers and things like that, which are in essence patriot newspapers. But there's so many people, the majority of the people are turning to the alternative medias to the point where the mainstream media is going to have to just get with it now or lose out entirely. I mean, it's just time for it to turn around. The demand of the people has risen to that proportion in this country.
Exactly.
So you're planning also, I was told that, what you can tell me about this global education order? What is this all about and how you understand it? We didn't have, or we're not aware of that in Europe for time being.
Makes me wonder if it's under a different name. There's a lot of different names that's used in this country, in Canada and Mexico that I'm aware of. The Global Education 2000, Goals 2000. In this country it's referred to as America 2000, outcome-based education. So there's a lot of different names. But in essence, it's a form of teaching that is a method of teaching through computers and headphones that affects the subconscious more directly.
The same stuff we were working on in the 60s and 70s for NASA, so that astronauts could remember everything that they saw while in space. Some of those same principles are being applied in our schools using simple computers. Back in those days, though, they didn't have simple computers. They were quite elaborate. It would fill a room with equipment now you can have on your lap.
So what is the philosophy behind also on the control of the masses, or what is global education? What
It
it
is
means?
an absolute control of the masses and supposedly a control on the gross national product. The productivity of these children when they emerge as adults and are going to be in a work environment. It's a very easy way to put them into certain classifications very quickly, very simply, and everybody does the same job that they're assigned supposedly much more efficiently. There seems to be a tremendous amount of questions of whether or not that could actually happen. In some areas, I can assure you that efficiency does go up, but creativity goes down. And our species, our human species, has evolved because of its ability to become creative. Once our creativity is stifled, then we will be plunged into a dark ages that would, I suppose, rival anything in history. So we're on the threshold for that now, Bruce.
When I was forced to work under Secretary of Education Bill Bennett during the Reagan administration, I was forced to deliver a message to the state governors at a convention that was being held. And this particular message included the idea that they could control the future by controlling the children, and that by controlling the information that the children learned, and in other words, adjusting history to fit their own agenda, that they could actually be affecting the future. And in essence, I suppose that that's true, that children are our future.
But how you explain the phenomena, how many people that you believe and how many programs of mind control are existing now, and how many people that you know that were together with you? You was also mentioning School of Charm, something like that.
Yes, there's the charm school where the sex slaves in particular were taken through, and there were a half dozen to a dozen girls going through at a time for a 3-day course. And there were so many mind-controlled slaves in my own controlled environment that I genuinely believe that the whole world was involved in mind control. I thought that's the way the world was. There were that many. I don't know the exact numbers.
But where was that school located, and how many people were attending? Can they call it course?
Youngstown, Ohio, and it was.
Was a military base or?
No, actually it was part of the university area, and it was an old museum-type house that was used by a banking family here that's quite affluent, the Mellon banking family. So they were involved directly in my victimization. The so-called governor of Charm School was. And that was Stuart Mellon that I'm aware of. But there were quite a few girls that were run through there, and I went through there on the average of once a year for reprogramming or additional.
What kind of program is there? What it taught you there?
To fulfill different perversions. For example, there was an oral sex program that involved not breathing for an extended period of time, so that the man would be gratifying himself in the throat without allowing for any breathing to go on, and he would actually become so excited by the idea that he could be suffocating the girl that would be his sexual thrill. And that was one thing that we were taught. It was called a 3-minute miracle. to be able to sexually gratify someone before you were killed. And I am aware of girls that died exactly that way. Other perversions included bestiality and the bisexuality. There were numerous perversions.
It was done on university and in a special area of university. Who was the teacher there?
No, it wasn't associated with the university. It was just near the Youngstown University area, within that Mellon home. So it was nobody actually lived there. It was used strictly for bringing girls in on occasion. I really don't know how often the doors were open, if they stayed open or if they only opened them on certain occasions.
Is it the bank that was involved in this drug trafficking and a lot of scandals in the United States?
Yes, Jim Trafficant was involved, and he's a U.S. congressman that has infiltrated the patriot groups, acting like he's somebody that is concerned for the welfare of our country, when in fact that's not his agenda at all. And he was one of those. He and Dick Thornburg were among those that would test the girls to see if they could actually be released from charm school. It was very torturous.
Okay. So, Mark, you have some additional material that was requested from a publisher and people from the media in Europe that you would like to present me today. What material we're talking about that you'll be giving, supporting your book and your thesis?
There's been a variety of publications that have been put out over the past, we'll say 5 years, that support the vast majority of everything that's in our book. A General Russell Bowen wrote The Immaculate Deception, subtitled The Bush Crime Family Exposed. He goes into Bush's worldwide oil deals, his arrangements that he has made with the Arab world, his cocaine business and drug business out of the Far East as well as out of South America. General Bowen worked for George Bush, and he worked for the CIA for a number of years, and actually believed that he was importing drugs to be distributed in the Soviet Union. He felt like this was part of the psychological warfare that we were waging against the Soviet Union. He did not realize that George Bush was actually putting these drugs on the streets of America. And when he did, he began to testify against his own government, and as a result wound up being imprisoned himself. Now, Russell, or General Bowen, is now living in Peru. He moved about 5 weeks ago. He moved actually the third week in February of 1996 of this year. But he did produce a wonderful document called The Immaculate Deception. And like many other books that describe what Cathy O'Brien experienced at the hands of our government as a slave in the drug muling and prostitution business, she also had provided facts actually before General Bowen wrote his book. She provided the facts to a number of persons that are familiar to me, both in military intelligence and within the CIA. In addition to just this one book, we have probably our largest single files are medical documentations. There are literally thousands of pages of medical documentation where the psychologists and psychiatrists that have examined Cathy O'Brien and her daughter have all confirmed what we know are the findings. In addition to that, Canadian intelligence, of whom I am acquainted with some of the members, have provided more information with regards to some of the perpetrators that Cathy O'Brien mentions, such as Michael Aquino, who is head of or was formerly a United States Army colonel in charge of psychological warfare. here in the United States.
He's a very famous figure. He considered as a Nazi person who formed a ritual.
As a matter of fact, he embraces the whole philosophy of Nazism, and he was a few years ago, in 1987, there was a search warrant issued as a result of some complaints by local children being molested in his home. Well, when they went into his home, they did find a number of articles relating to Nazi belief systems, symbologies, symbols, things of this nature, but they also found something else. Colonel Aquino is head of what is known as the Temple of Set. The Temple of Set is actually a spin-off church of the Church of Satan. Like Heinrich Himmler was researching, and by the way, Heinrich Himmler is his hero. Heinrich Himmler was studying the black arts and trying to understand more about the effect on the person's mind that is exposed to these blood rituals and sort of thing. What, amazingly enough, Colonel Aquino found out that this was a wonderful trauma base for controlling people's minds. Cathy O'Brien and her daughter both had, and unfortunately, a great deal of exposure to Michael Aquino, and we have a number of people in the United States military who have stepped forward and provided credible testimony to support her her findings and statements and testimony before federal agents. It's unusual, and I must tell you this. Michael Aquino has sued, he's a litigant, he has sued everyone who has ever attacked him in a publication, or on radio, or on television. And he, in some of his lawsuits, have been quite successful. We are the only exception. The reason being is because if he would sue us, we could take him to court with hard proof of his abuses of Cathy and her daughter. And of course, this is the same situation that exists with George Bush and some of the others. But Michael Aquino had a book written around him, and I'll read you something, and it says, what most people don't know, and what U.S. law enforcement officers are only beginning to discover, is that Satanism is the fastest growing underground criminal movement in the world today, and that it is directly linked to an exploding number of child abuse cases, Nazism, drug dealing, pornography, and prostitution. Now, this sounds very familiar because this is exactly what Cathy O'Brien has been talking about. Linda Blood is a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, we are mentioned in her book several times. This New Satanist, it came out last year by Dell Publishing here in the United States. The CIA did not want it to stay on the market, so they stopped the publication, just as they would have ours had we allowed a publisher to handle it. But this particular book literally rips off the covers of secrecy concerning Michael Aquino's use of Nazism and blood traumas and Satanism to externally control the mind through trauma.
I noticed that in most of this book that you provide me as extra material to your book, we are facing a similarity between Nazism, Nazi Germany, and the United States today, or George Bush, World War order. In all this material, is it coincidence, or you believe that it's formally like that?
I believe, like many intelligence officers believe, and many federal officers believe, who are associated closely with the mechanism in Washington, that Nazism is alive and well in this country because it was just simply exported from Germany in the 40s. I'm adamant to say that I don't believe Nazism ever died. I just think it was resurrected over here because as our conversations earlier in the day concerning Project Paperclip have proven, that we imported all these scientists with all these ideas and how to create chaos in a society, and they have done an excellent job.
What other materials you're providing us as well?
There's a great number of bodies of research concerning Himmler's use of people in human experiments to create the perfect proverbial Manchurian candidate. All of this research has been actually collected by a number of top-notch physicians and lawyers around this country. I've been very privileged to have been a part of contributing from my experience in the 60s and the 70s working for the Defense Department and being associated with the project known as MK Ultra, which is, of course, the United States government's code name for the mind control experiments. In addition to that, there are, and this is some of the lawyers' briefs about what they have discovered so far as the secret government goes in our country that is actually undermining the efforts of every good person in this country. The Mormon Church, of course, is highly affected, much like the Catholics are, because their belief systems have actually been. Here's an article here. Top Mormon officials probe member allegations of satanic abuse. The Mormon Church is literally under fire right now because they're claiming that better than 60% of the children in the Mormon Church in some way or another have been sexually and psychologically abused in their daycare settings and other church-sponsored functions. It's really it's reached a point now of epidemic stage in this country. You know, Luke, in 1980 there were 200 cases of this dissociative identity disorder that the American Psychiatric and American Psychological Associations had actually published. There were 200 reported cases. In 1990, there were 250,000 cases reported in this country. And in 1995, 2.5 million cases reported.
Of child abuse?
No, of multiple personality disorder, or what is known as dissociative identity disorder. That's what Cathy O'Brien and her daughter suffered from.
Anywhere publicly numbers that you were mentioning now? Do you have any quotation from that magazine, scientific magazine?
Yes, the American Psychiatric Association is the one who compiled these figures from their group of participating psychiatrists across the United States, and actually Canada too is included in the studies.
I could understand logically putting all these facts, the knowledges together, that we're talking now about mind control operation on a big scale in the United States,
Yes,
which
sir.
scary me.
Yes,
Is that what you want to say?
It's very scary. Yes, sir, and it is big in terms of numbers because, VUK, when you're talking about 2.5 million people, and the estimates are that only 1 in 10 are actually seen and diagnosed, you're talking about 20 to 25 million people. That constitutes a sizable portion of the United States with a serious psychological problem. Serious. Those kind of people are capable of becoming serial killers. They usually suicide themselves at very young ages. They themselves will be child abusers. They'll abuse their own children and not even know they're doing it. It becomes autogenic behavior. In other words, it's just a knee-jerk response system. In addition to that, you asked me a question. You said, is Cathy O'Brien the first person that has ever come forward? The answer to you then was no. There's been many, but only one has ever been considered completely put together and competent and had her case documented as well as Cathy's. And that was a lady by the name of Candy Jones. Candy Jones, this is a copy of a book that was published in 1976, I believe. And Candy Jones, let's see, well, yeah, 1976, excuse me. Candy Jones was used by the CIA as a prostitute, as a mind control prostitute. She had suffered sexual abuse as a child. Her husband was a prominent radio announcer in New York, and his name was Long John Neville. And Mr. Neville was quite successful in enlisting the services of friends within the intelligence community who actually persuaded the CIA to admit that they had been using this woman as a proverbial Manchurian candidate or a mind control slave. Well, other than Candy Jones, no one else the CIA has ever admitted doing this to. Even though they were caught in Canada in the early 70s, or actually late 60s, they were caught using a psychiatrist they were paying, the CIA was paying, to torture individuals at a particular mental hospital in Montreal. Dr. Ewan Cameron. By the way, it should be noted that Dr. Cameron was the original founder of the American Psychiatric Association and was the man that our head of the intelligence community, Alan Dulles, in the 50s, put into the position of being in control of MK-Ultra. So mind control is not new in this country or any other country. It's been around for thousands of years. But the sophistication of it to this point has now reached such a proportion that people are seeing the results everywhere, but they don't see is the sophistication of the mind control itself. They don't recognize the symptoms that are being created in these people until it's too late. Walter Bauer, a fellow friend and researcher, wrote a book in 1978 called Operation Mind Control. Walter did perhaps one of the best bodies of research that has ever been provided, but unfortunately Walter allowed Dell Publishing Company to print his book, and the CIA, although they paid him quite well for it, bought all the copies off the shelves and bought the rights to the book from Dell and took it off the market, because this information was much, much, much too powerful to be released into the private sector.
What's happened to him later on? He was
Walter himself had become a victim as a result of his research into this. The CIA had administered a very powerful drug to him and hurt Walter a great deal. But Walter has since recovered and continues his research.
What was happened to him? You know him personally, so you
Yes,
know what kind of drugs they gave him?
They gave him a drug called ibogaine. Ibogaine is an extract from a vine that comes out of Brazil. And ibogaine produces characteristically a type of delusional behavior consistent with someone who is clinically insane for all practical purposes. And they will have good days and they'll have bad days. Walter had been affected for over 44 days.
But tell me, he was married to the woman that was
yes, he was married to the Mellon banking family. That same Mellon banking family, by the way, is one of the most powerful banking families in the entire world, and was originally put together with the Rockefellers, and they've been implicated in practically every money laundering scandal that this country's ever known, particularly involving George Bush and his drugs and the CIA.
So the bank is closed right away, right?
Oh, no.
No?
It's one of the most prominent banks in the world and remains such today. And
he has to divorce this woman because the bank was actually covered up for the CIA. Is that
Yes.
correct information?
He was divorced, and any money that he had had as a result of that relationship is gone. They took it away from him and left him penniless. I got reports from all over the world. Dr. Hans Gruber, himself a physician, or Hans Greitz rather, is indeed a victim of mind control by a cooperative effort of the KGB and the CIA. And he also has thrown another one into the mix called the Shabak, which is the Iranian intelligence gathering group. Dr. Greitz has been in touch with Walter Bauer and myself and some of the other avid researchers in this country for a number of years now. He himself is in a state of recovery. Unfortunately, in Germany, this disorder is not even recognized as being real. If you have it, they'll say that you have something else. They do not allow anything to be written on mind control. They do not allow anything to be published on government abuse of external control of the mind or behavioral modification. They won't allow any kind of term associated with it. There's a tremendous amount of information available on what has happened across the country and around the world regarding mind control. But I think the most prominent thing that we've seen in the last few years, as a researcher, I can say this, even though I have been personally involved with Cathy O'Brien, her case, as far as the physicians in this country, and I'm a member of the International Society for the Study of Dissociation, which is a very prestigious group of physicians worldwide who are attempting to build a model for practical recovery of persons like Cathy O'Brien. And at this point, the American Psychiatric Association is actually considering publication of a treatment modality that I have co-developed from my sources in the CIA. The same treatment method and modality that I used to work with Cathy O'Brien successfully to bring her case to a conclusion. And as you know, for the past 5.5 years, she and I have been on a lecture circuit with physicians and law enforcement, and they've been gaining extra credit just for listening to her tell her story.
So we're going tomorrow to see Kelly.
Yes.
I believe that Kelly one day will be rescued and will be able to do
Yes.
something with the help, of course, with the full knowledge and...
With the people that are watching this video right now, those people, if they will do something, whether it is to have our book published in their respective country, or whether it is for generating publicity for this case, that's all it's going to take, VUK, in order for us to be able to successfully get this girl into a therapy that will help her.
Thank you, Mark, for your extensive report.
Thanks, bud.
This is a mental institution, and now with Cathy and Mark, we're going to visit her and take her for lunch. And it's the first time that this girl was allowed to go All right. Make a shot around.
I'm going to get her.
Is that the place?
Yeah.
It's a small place.
It's huge.
It's huge?
Huge on the inside. It looks small on the outside.
Oh, really?
That place is enormous. It doesn't look more than maybe 2,500 square feet. I mean, there's 5,000 square feet in that place.
So, can you tell us something about this place? The camera?
The only thing I can tell you is that it's called a group home, and it's, you see that van there? That's a state vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you've got permission from the court, you can't go in there. It's a bummer. All those doors are electric. The windows are that material that you can't break. You know, it's a fairly secure place.
So nobody could go out from the PP?
Well, they do, but you know.
All right.
Homicidal, suicidal like this.
Was Alex Spector also in the slaves?
Yes. Arlen Spector had his own, and that was who Cathy was used with. They used her in commercial pornography, and that's now there's quite a bit of that commercial stuff out there still. Larry Flint did that stuff, and of course that was one of the reasons that woman's still alive too, because they would have killed her because they were afraid that she might begin remembering. She made a comment to me when we found her. She said, "Nobody would believe what I can't remember." Nobody would believe what I can't remember.
Can we find her, or she's not?
Oh, I know who she is.
Yeah? Can we speak to her?
No. No, she's like Kelly. She's crazy.
Even though she's old? Older?
She's Kathy's age, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
She's now in some institution, too?
No. She's still locked into the system. But, because they're using her children.
Mm-hmm. They're still using her children?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. See, that's why Kelly's here, because they'd be using her. See, the courts fought Kathy for 5 years to take her back. And they were going to give her to the biological father, the serial killer, or to Alex Houston, or to Kathy's father, or to Kathy's sister. They were trying to do this, and that's what we kept fighting, and we kept beating them. So when Kelly tried to kill 2 people in her institution, the last place, then they couldn't turn her loose. And she tried to take a brick and cave this woman's head in, this woman that worked there. But, she won't appear. I mean, she.
Where's the answers? Maybe he just take her from inside of the car, so she wouldn't see the car. I just want to have it on the camera once. I mean, is she coming from there or from here?
She'll be coming right down the front steps.
From there?
Yeah.
Окей,
Right
ovdje će da počne da dolazi, vidiš ovdje. Stavi kameru tako da bude došlo da snima bar idemo na video. So I don't know if we'll be able to record Kathy, right? Kelly,
I would do it. Let's see what's happening first, and ask Kathy first.
Okay.
Because Kelly's clinically insane, and cameras, of course, are what was used against her. So she's terrified of them.
Tell me something about these pornography films.
Yes.
They're existing?
Oh, God, yeah. Tons of them. Off the record, we've got a lot of them. And that was one of the things that I turned over to the FBI, and they threatened to lock me up on it. Because they said, this kind of pornography is illegal. You can't own it. And I turned it over to a federal judge, and the federal judge said, you come up with one more piece of evidence and we're going to lock you up for 20 years. I said, well, there are other people out there with evidence, and they'll come forward when the time is right. Truth of the matter is,
protecting them, particularly their people, right?
yes. Truth of the matter is, I've got tons of it.
And Larry Flint?
Yeah, it's Larry Flint's. Some of it's Larry Flint stuff. Some of it is.
It was illegal for him to do that to a child, with children?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. In this country, it's 20 years to life for photographing children.
But he was never prosecuted.
But he was Ronald Reagan's best friend in the whole world. Ronald Reagan is a real sleazo. I mean, he didn't like children, but he's a real sleazy bastard. Most people don't know this. Ronald Reagan's an actor, and so they thought he was a good guy. But, oh, he's terrible.
So it was Larry Flint's signature in the film, or can somebody prove it was
No. Yeah,
yeah.
Some of them, yeah.
So instead of it, nobody could do anything.
You can't do anything.
If you could take the films and go to some movie channel or something, doesn't work.
No. I'd go to jail.
Okay.
You want to pull in? Oh, I was stating that there's a very good chance that when Kathy arrived to pick her daughter up, her daughter had no memory, even though they've been talking about this.
Can you speak the master off?
I was setting the time.
Oh, I see.
I'm listening to it.
Okay.
The child will probably have very little ability to even remember what she and her mother had talked about doing today. And I know Kathy told me, she said, well, Kelly ought to be ready to go, and she'll have her hiking clothes on. And I said, Kathy, it'll be the first time. I said, she will not remember, most likely, that you were even going to be here today. Yeah, and it's always this way. Of course, Kathy always hopes that the next time she sees her, she'll remember.
Oh, I see.
It just doesn't happen. It can't happen.
So she was used she was from the day A to be in the program, right?
Yeah, absolutely. From the moment she was born. They were doing amniocentesis, or whatever they call it, on Kathy at NASA, on Kathy, when the child was still in her womb. They were doing all the kind of probing around and sticking the needles through the stomach and everything else. I have no earthly idea what they were doing. I can assure you
But
that.
somebody knows what was done on her. She has a file.
Yeah, there's tons of files, but I don't have access to those files. I do have access.
Okay, to dolazi malo.
I have access to one or two of the
S
files.
njima njih i nas prvo vidimo. No, we're from around Europe.
Really? What part of Europe?
From Yugoslavia.
Former Yugoslavia?
Yeah, formerly Yugoslavia. We are bad Serbs.
Is that where you're from, Serbia?
Yes.
You guys just touring around the United States?
He was born here, but I'm touring.
Well, 3 cents hours. That's
Hey guys. How are you?
Hey!
Hello everybody. Nice New Year, isn't it?
Change my weeds. Like, I don't go back.
Hi guys. Hello guys.
Say hi. Hello. Hello, we.
Are you okay? Kelly. Hi, babe.
Aloha!
Hi, guys.
That one it won't work. It's got your
Looks
leg
like
would
a
have-
wind vane.
Your leg would have to go backwards. Let me see if I can get this over here.
Kelly, do you like this area here?
Hey, do what?
You're happy today?
Okay, not funny, Mark. Dad, I know what that one is. That's not...
I tell you what, if I went off there, I'd be doing some serious flapping.
That wasn't
I always said if I fall off, I want to say I'm going to flap my arms. I'm going to flap them like a damn honeybee.
Hummingbird is what I'll be flapping on. That's pretty fast.
Pretty good. If you know what the hummingbird is aerodynamically able to fly. Damn old bumblebee.
Milane? Hi.
Hey, how you doing, Luke?
Okay.
Yeah, because
Milane did very good participation in our programming.
The fuselage is
I'm just relaxing a little bit here, enjoying the view.
All right.
body weight. In the air, they weigh nothing.
Is that a tick, Dad?
What?
Or is it a bug? It's just a bug.
He's a bug.
Probably CI.
For now.
All right, girls. You like our day today, huh?
Fun. Tiring, but fun.
All right.
Who's more tired, the mother or the daughter?
Should we take a vote? God. All right, whose legs are wiggling the most?
What books are you reading now, Kelly? Kelly, what books are you reading now? Is there any books particular title?
Anything. Magazine? Yeah. Extraordinary Science, Discovery magazines. I don't know, that's about...
What's your favorite television station that you like the most?
Oh, Discovery Channel.
Really?
By far, definitely. That and Comedy Central.
Oh, really?
What Comedy Central? Because they exposed Bill Clinton quite thoroughly, as if the rest of the world hasn't already done so. Yeah. Really?
You don't like Bill Clinton?
Pardon?
You don't like Bill Clinton?
Not really. He's kind of dumb. Hillbill kind of goes good together.
How about the Hillary?
Too manipulative. Right. Anybody that works for the United States of America, I can't really tell. I don't like most of them that much. For the new U.S., I can understand it.
Do you believe there will be new U.S. someday? Something new?
It's changing rapidly. Should we do feet for him? What? Yeah. That's right. Foot for thought. Really?
Would you like to go to Italy?
Pardon?
Would you like to go to Italy with us?
Yeah, very much so.
So we can make a study and do all these tours, Florence, Rome,
I would love to
Venice.
visit Florence.
Venice is the most beautiful. Napoli is beautiful. Naples, the most beautiful place in the world.
What kind of? I'd love to go.
What changes are you looking for most in this country and in your situation?
To stop the manipulation of lesser people.
Howdy, girls.
And which way you mean? Which way manipulation you're talking about?
Do what?
Which manipulations you're talking about?
Anything from mind control to, God. Yeah, justicism, definitely. The control the state has over the whereabouts of children and the abuse that gets placed on them while they're in custody.
Yeah, a separation of family. I always say the separation of families.
How effective separation from your mother? How affect your life?
Probably drawing us closer together, if anything. The exact opposite of what everybody else wanted to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Do you remember anything from your past life and abuse? Can you remember?
Not much. I still have a block.
There's
How is this feeling and remembering of that situation? How is it affecting your life? I'm your friend.
If you want to.
Yeah, well,
That actually makes sense.
I'm just about to
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I'm just about to reveal in all the world your story, the story of your wife. No. Sorry, you understood wrong. But on this fact, to punish the people who did what they've done to you, to your life and to your emotion, to your. This is my goal in life. My father was in concentration camp by the Nazi, and he went. That's why I'm against every violation and everything in life. I deeply, I think about you every day. So do you believe one day you will be able to remember everything, Kelly?
yeah. One day.
What's your favorite actor?
My favorite actor?
Yeah.
What do you think of actors?
They're people. Just the same. They just have a talent for entertaining other people.
Right. Is there anybody that you particularly like, or?
Brad Pitt, because he's attractive. And the movie that he's coming out with, what was it called?
I don't know.
He's coming out with some movie that speaks out against, it's entitled Sleepers, that's what it was, Sleepers. And it's about, like, people being abused under hypnosis, and also, I probably like Adrian Paul just because there's more to him than meets the eye off of his television series. And Steven Seagal, needless to say, he's a brilliant man, and he's proven that through his little messages in every movie he's ever made, except for that one cheap one.
Yeah.
Do you like?
What's he proven through those movies?
He's proven that the government's fucking us all over. Pardon my French.
Which way? Many ways, right?
At least it exposes it.
In all ways. They're literally.
What do you think of the news?
Shit. Right, think about it. A lot isn't being said. On some things it is.
What would you like to see more of on the news?
Everything being told. Tired of the hiding, the covering up. Power is in secrets. Without the secrets, there's no power. The secret's out.
Do you believe one day all the secrets will come out?
Oh, definitely. We're more than halfway there. Halfway was admitting finally that something's up, period.
Yeah. And,
Kelly, how you believe that you would like to live with your mother again and with Mark happily?
Hopefully sometime in the near future, like maybe this year, we'll be living together in a log cabin somewhere in Alaska.
Oh, you like Alaska?
Love it.
Oh, that's a place where you're...
It's wonderful. Perfect temperature, perfect scenery, just perfect.
Do you remember anything of your childhood, or it's really like a barrier in your mind?
Well, I think the best things I remember is the horses, some of the good walks I took with my mom, and the time when we were going on daily motorcycle rides with Dad.
In Alaska?
No, in Keystone Springs, Tennessee.
Oh.
It was about 6, 7.
How about Alex Houston? Do you like?
no.
Do you remember him? Do you remember Alex Houston?
Lying bastard. Well, actually, I don't know.
Is Alex Houston in your memory, or
Not really. I block out like a photographic picture of him. But I mean, I know who he is if I were to see him. I know it.
When's the last time you met him? You saw him, do you remember?
God, 9 years ago?
Just about.
Yeah, about
1988.
So about 8 years ago. Yeah.
How about Cox?
Unfortunately, I got the privilege of seeing him about, 4 years ago?
last time I think, at Cumberland House, and I was physically restrained and forced to see him, and my head pushed against the floor because I refused to talk to him. That was a pleasant memory.
So what is the purpose of his visiting you? Just to...
I don't know. I don't care. I just don't want to have anything to do with it.
When was the last time you saw him?
The result the last time I saw him was drastic, emotionally traumatized me, I'll tell you that. And it gave me a pretty good headache.
You're a gorgeous girl. And I believe that you have a great career in front of you. And you'll be a great writer. I'm definitely positive. You're really the most brilliant girl I've met in absolutely the last 10 years. Most brilliant, intelligent, and beautiful.
And the bad thing is I can't even exercise my brain.
Why?
Well, the place I'm at now, I mean, everybody there is dumb. I mean, they're not ignorant, because at least if you're ignorant, you can be taught. Just terrible. They think a big word would be something like deluxe or caviar.
So you're not happy in the place you're now?
No, definitely not. I enjoy it sometimes, but more often I don't than I do.
So
if I wasn't there, I wouldn't have got to meet a lot of great people.
So you like prefer to be in some college, go to study? What is your favorite subject that you would like to study? Like some science?
Oh, science, definitely. Science and literature. Any of those. I'm good at math, but it's not something I would actually study, per se. Oh, well, I might. Take that back. Because that ties in a lot to science. The two kind of go hand in hand.
Do you like to be a writer? Journalist?
Not really. I like it for a pastime, but I think overall, veterinary is calling me. That's my calling.
What is now your education is looking like? How you can describe your education system in the place you're now?
Okay, I'm supposed to be either in, I think it would be geometry or in Algebra 2. Instead, I'm doing pre-algebra. Mm-hmm. I'm supposed to be in English 2, but I'm doing 7th grade English, like spelling. It's just ridiculous.
you have a Shakespearean English. How somebody could taught you spelling and all this stuff? You said because other people are like this, other people that are there. How many people are there in this room, in this place you are there?
In the house that I'm living in, there's 7 other girls besides myself.
The only girls?
Uh-huh.
Only girls there?
7.
Oh, I see.
All in the whole program, I don't know, uncountable. About a couple hundred, maybe. About 100. Somewhere in there.
Oh, wonderful. So where do you have your studying? Where you go to school? I'm sorry. I must be very...
Wrong.
Wrong. I'm sorry. Where do you have your teaching? Am I, did I say something wrong?
Pardon?
Did I say something wrong? I'm your friend, am I?
Yeah, definitely.
I like you very much. You're my friend for life.
Definitely.
And I would like to go with you and your father and mother to Europe and really enjoy in some beautiful areas.
Sounds like a real good idea.
Oh, yes. Definitely will definitely do it.
Yes. Right now, though, is this on? Oh,
it's on camera.
I have someplace else I need to go very badly.
I do, too.
It's called a facility.
Okay.
You got 3 people that are going to stain your
I want to visit John, my best friend at this moment. Either that or
I've got a French girl named Toilette.
Either that or a redwood tree right about now. We really appreciate you, Boo.
Okay.
Definitely.
So I have to stop the camera. Mark, you have very, very particular plates there.
Yes.
What it means is it's your program.
Yeah, it's our. Has something to do with the book, as you well know.
I see. Okay, I stay with Mark and Cathy and Kelly. I met Kelly today for the first time, and I really appreciate my 2 days trip to Mark's and Cathy's home. Now I met Cathy, and she had enormous, if I would not know her condition, she's a very bright girl. I mean, you know, her vocabulary and her everything is absolutely superb, and her, I would say that her IQ is above average, at least 50%. I could see, even she's 16. What is her condition now, and how you describe that from your scientific point of view?
Kelly's condition has been diagnosed by a number of physicians, and I too have tested her, but she's been tested in a number of institutions, professionally by psychiatrists and psychologists, and she suffers from what is known as dissociative identity disorder, or DID. It used to be known as multiple personality disorder. Now it is known as dissociative identity disorder. This disorder is created as a result of severe repeated trauma, and particularly before age 5. Kelly's trauma base was, of course, sexual trauma, psychological trauma, and physical trauma, and tortures continually all through her childhood, as suffering from dissociative identity disorder. Part of the symptoms of this disorder are her inability to remember from moment to moment. And in order for her to appear normal, she mirrors anyone that she is in contact with. So they feel very comfortable with her.
So I said to her, for example, I like Discovery Channel.
Yes.
Is that right? And then she said, yes, it's the only thing I'm watching.
Yes, exactly.
You see, there was some particular moment in time. Now I'm recalling that.
Exactly.
Is it called mirror?
It's called mirroring.
I see.
She will mirror your actions, the way you hold your hands, the way you talk. Eventually, she'll even begin to pick up your accent. The disorder itself is most unfortunate, most uncomfortable to the person that suffers from it. But the worst part is it develops into suicidal and homicidal behavior. They become, these people that suffer from DID, in many instances, but not all, become very agitated very easily for things that we don't even know that could agitate them. A word or a place or a suggestion or a thing can set them off, and they become extremely violent, either towards themselves or towards others. Kelly's situation is not without this horrific, terrible symptom. She suffered it many, many times, and that's the reason that she has been maintained in a mental institution for most of her life. She has spent from age 8, she is now 16, she has lived in a mental institution, or in an institutionalized setting.
So what was her life before? She was NASA Institute?
The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, I hold directly responsible for her condition, because it was they that was developing the programs under some Nazi scientists that were brought to this country under Project Paperclip for the purposes of researching and developing multi-generational incest abuse. Yes. The actual purposes that NASA had for this child, I have no idea. There is no basis for my understanding of what they were going to do with her. There are many people that have suggested maybe they were going to use her as an assassin. Others have suggested that this was a normal thing as a result of the trauma. I can tell you that in many instances, these children develop this antisocial behavior in becoming what you and I would term suicidal or homicidal. In other words, they either want to inflict harm upon themselves or harm upon others for no apparent reason. This type of psychotic condition will not just go away with age. The child must be deprogrammed. The work that would be required of her would take possibly years of recovery and therapy, and a great deal of money. That's the reason that we've gone public with our book. That's the reason that we are in the process of making a documentary film as well as a motion picture, is to recover enough money to help this child through her recovery period. Now, for 8 years, she's been in a mental institution receiving what you and I would consider therapy to some degree. But it is not effective therapy, only because her victimization was so different than that of her mother's, because her mother was not abused by NASA when she was born. Her mother wasn't abused except by her father and her father's associates. Her mother was abused sexually, of course, psychologically and physically, but she was not subjected to the high-tech tortures that Kelly was from the time that she was born all the way up until I rescued she and her mother when she was age 8.
What is your opinion now? You don't need to answer this question because it's very touchy questions. The United States has one of the biggest terrorist acts in history. Everything was absolutely fascinating, or a negative way, like I did. I was here with Oklahoma case. There's a lot of opinions. I spoke with Ted Garrison, who is one of the FBI star, a person who really had the best career in FBI, who quoted there was 2 explosions that Timothy McVeigh was. Do you believe that Timothy McVeigh was under mind control?
I have no hard evidence to support my own theory. I've talked to Ted Gunderson on many occasions, and I've spoken with many other really qualified experts who have evaluated what sparse evidences there are available. And VUK, I can tell you that based on what I have heard, I am left to only believe that Mr. McVeigh is a victim of mind control. But Mr. McVeigh, of course, admitted on camera